All right, everyone, welcome back to the Saturday in Athens GA podcast. My name is Marshall Barton, and today I'm giving you my full breakdown on Georgia Ole Miss. I came on here a couple days ago and gave a little early preview of what I think of this game, a couple statistics, some trends among these teams. It's been a while since I've really sat down and done a full in-depth episode on a Georgia game, but we're back. I've got two interviews for y'all today in this episode. One with Hammy Culpepper, one with my good friend Jackson Evans. Both of those are about an hour-ish. I'll have those time stamped below so you can skip around if you want to certain parts. But I'm going to go ahead and just give this a very simple intro or outline for the episode. So kind of going over that, and then we'll do the game analysis from those weekly slides that I post with Hammy and UGA Rush and Georgia Dogs coverage. As I said, go into those interviews. Got a couple extra things for y'all. Some big injury news. Colby Young is probable to play in this football game. I know a lot of people really saw him practicing. Some people may or may not have thought that he would really play in this game. Looks like he's going to play in this game as of now. He's listed as probable. I don't know if that's to kind of throw Ole Miss off. I don't know if that's what Kirby's doing here or if this is just like a genuine he's going to play. But if he's listed as probable, we should have some hope as Georgia fans. So I'm really excited to see that he's probable. Probably more predictable one would have been Ethan Barber, who's looked really full speed in practice. He'll play for sure, but he's also listed as probable. But we'll go over the rest of the injuries in a little bit. Georgia's number 3. 12-1, coming off of the SEC championship, obviously have not played a game since then, taking on number 6 Ole Miss. Ole Miss's lone loss on the year is to Georgia in Athens by 8 points by a score of 43-35. They're the number 6 team heading into this matchup. So All-State Sugar Bowl, obviously, Georgia fans don't have that great of a taste left in their mouth from last year. Obviously, the horrific terrorist attack occurred during this game last year. Please keep all the people involved with just the horrors of that in your prayers. Just truly a terrible thing. Even I know I wasn't there, and I don't really know anybody that was truly impacted by that, at least that I know of. But still, just such a horrific thing, and just even thinking about that, it hurts. It hurts more when you know it's a lot of people who are in a community that you're in. So just such a horrible event, but glad that's behind us. Please, if you're in New Orleans this week, just watch out. Be safe. It's not a safe place, or it's at least there's definitely some crime there. So I would encourage you to be on the lookout. Be aware of your surroundings. I'll pray that pray for y'all's safety while you're there. I'll not be there. Hammy and I talk a little bit later. In this episode, he'll be at that game, so obviously he's got to kind of carry the burden of me not being there. He's got to scream a little louder for me, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. The winner of this game goes on to play the winner of Ohio State and Miami in the Fiesta Bowl in Arizona. And Georgia has not played in the Fiesta Bowl, I don't know, ever, but I'll tell you what. I have a pretty good memory bank here for Georgia football, and I can't remember them being in the Fiesta Bowl. I know they haven't been in the Fiesta Bowl, at least in a very long time. So that would be a fun one to go play in. Georgia, in that first matchup, scored on every single drive, had a couple field goals, ultimately put up 43 and scored 5 touchdowns, however many it was. I think it was 5 touchdowns and a missed 2-point conversion, which brought you to 33, something like that, and then a couple field goals, 42, 43. Math's not perfect there, but you get what I'm saying. Ole Miss did score on their first 5 drives, score a touchdown on every single one of their first 5 drives, and then stalled out on those last 3 in the fourth quarter. I messed up a stat on the last episode. They ran 13 plays. 12 of them were passing. They did not run 13 plays. I almost messed it up again. They ran 11 plays, and 10 of them were passing. 1 of them was rushing. On those 11 plays, they got 13 yards, and 12 of them were rushing yards. So one of the points I was trying to bring up last time is they abandoned the run, and it really harmed them as a team in that first matchup. One of the more obvious parts of this game, one of the more obvious components, is that Lane Kiffin will not be present for this Ole Miss team. Sorry, my microphone's a little out of sorts right here. Lane Kiffin's not present for this Ole Miss team. Definitely changes the matchup a little bit for sure, but not a lot. Even Kirby came out earlier in the week and was really just talking about how it's the same team, it's the same staff, It's not that much of a change, at least for Georgia in preparation. I do love that this Georgia defense has so much film that they messed up on from the first time that they can go back and look at and really regroup as a team and just correct their errors from the last time. And they've grown so much since that first matchup. To think that that was October, and then we got a bye week, and then we went on just a tear of great defensive football games back to back to back to back to back to back to back for 6 straight weeks. Hopefully we can find our rhythm back right there. I think this is slated to be a great football game. I really do. I am confident in a Georgia win. I'll get more into that later in the episode. But I think Georgia wins this game, but I don't think it's easy by any stretch of the imagination. There was a betting market where Georgia -6.5 was the most popular bet of the playoff. My score prediction will have Georgia winning by more than 6.5, so I can say that. But I can also say this just feels like a game that it's not like it's that clear that Georgia's going to beat them by more than a touchdown, or I don't know. My point being, I'm not 100%. I'm 100% confident, but I'm also a little nervous, a little worried, because it is definitely going to be a tough game. Tough to beat a team twice. I know that's very much repeated, a very repetitive statement. But Kirby's also 4-0 in rematch games, so rematches in a single season, that is. So I fully trust Kirby here. I expect Georgia to win. I just don't expect it to be a blowout, but I also don't expect it to be a nail biter. In our analysis, we had Georgia better in every single position except for the running back position. We had it listed as even. Kawan Lacey was rumored to have had a separated shoulder in that last playoff game. That does not sound like the case because he is listed as probable for this Ole Miss team. Given that, we probably would have him around, or we would probably have that position comparison given in favor of Ole Miss. I do think Georgia has better depth at that position. I think everyone agreed with me in that group chat between myself, Hammy, UGA Rush, and Georgia Dogs coverage. But into further analysis right there, going further into those slides we put out every week. Georgia, again, playing Ole Miss in the Caesars Superdome. What a dumpy place. It just looks like a dump. I've never been there, so I can't fully say this with like full confidence, full validity, I guess. It does not look like the most beautiful stadium to me. It's got 76,000 plus seats, turf field, and you can expect closer to the end of the week that Georgia will be working out in their indoor practice facilities. They're actually now, that's what I wrote down here, but actually as of the time that I'm making this video, they've just arrived in New Orleans. So we can expect that they'll practice on that field at least once, probably more than that, leading up to the game. They'll do a walkthrough probably in the hotel the night before, maybe on the field. I'm not really sure. But an interesting statistic about this game between Georgia and Ole Miss: both teams average over 30 points per game, and both teams allow under 20 points per game. So, I mean, that's at least the 20 points per game part under that allowed is pretty impressive for both of these teams. Over 30 points is also really good, but not as impressive in my opinion. Both teams are over 400 yards per game. Georgia is allowing less than 300 yards per game at 284.5, and that's a huge turnaround from earlier in the year. Not exactly sure what it was through those first 7 games, but I can guarantee you it was a lot higher than 284.5. And Ole Miss is allowing 339.8, which isn't exactly great. That's not something to really brag about, but it's not the worst number you could ever have. Also, I mean, I remember Georgia Tech when we played them; they were allowing over 400 a game. So that's a horrible number. You never want over 400 yards allowed, of course. Like I said, Georgia's favored by 6.5. I expect us to cover, but I wouldn't be shocked if we don't, and I still wouldn't bet on that. I'm not a sports bettor anyway, but I still bring these things in because I believe they add some sort of value and perspective on what's going on. Yeah, it's just it's a good line. It's in the good lines are weird, if that makes sense. Good spreads, good lines are weird because you don't know which way to go, and that's why. Because it's close, you could go either way. It's a good line, and they put a lot of time. Vegas puts a lot of time into coming up with these lines. But I'm going to send you guys real quick to my interview with my good friend Jackson. We have a sit-down interview for about an hour, discuss various topics, Some of them are kind of broad in college football. Some of them are Georgia related. Then after that, I'll bring y'all back for just a second and then send y'all to my interview with Hammy, Culpepper, and TheHammyShow, where we discuss very strictly that Georgia matchup and Lane Kiffin. And really, we kind of discuss what Ole Miss is. Since we know what Georgia is as a team, we dive a bit into Ole Miss. Closer to the end there, we'll talk even more about Georgia. And then he'll give a score prediction. After that, I'll come back and give you my score prediction, and we'll move from there. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Saturday in Athens GA podcast. Today I'm joined by my great friend Jackson Evans, and we've been talking about, getting him on the podcast for quite some time, and he's finally here. Jackson, how are we feeling about Georgia and Ole Miss this Thursday, actually?
What's going on? Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this weekend. It feels like it's been a long time coming, which, we'll get into our conversation later about, this bye week and everything like that. Guys get time to go home and have their Christmas break, open presents and everything like that. I've seen guys, all the stories from all the different players doing stupid stuff at home. But
there's been some players doing great stuff too. You've seen around. Christian Miller went and delivered some turkeys for Thanksgiving, I believe, but that was a while ago. You got some other players who went to, they go around the stores in Athens and buy gifts for the kids. So, but it's so cool having a team that you got a lot of Georgia players, obviously, but everyone's from all over the place. Like Nate Frazier's from California, so people just go home, and the way they treat their community is really cool to see. But yeah, it's been a while.
Nate Frazier and Zach Branch playing Fortnite in San Francisco.
Yes, that was really hilarious. No one expected that, and then they just posted, here's their promotion. They're playing Fortnite on the Jumbotron in Sanford Stadium. So that's pretty funny.
That's a weird, for Fortnite. That's
really
so
random.
Funny.
I feel like that's got to be weird playing
Georgia football. Yeah.
It doesn't just. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like that would happen.
You got Gunner and Luke Bryan fishing.
Yeah,
so.
but that does seem like that. Yeah, that checks
that's
out.
A Gunner thing. So.
I got added on that post. Thank you, DGD Outdoors, for that. But Jackson is a pretty big critic of just NIL and all that stuff in general. So I've tried to gear some of these questions towards that field for him. I mean, obviously, no one's really fully on board with NIL, or most people are not. But he's got some critiques, I'm sure, that we want to talk about today. So the first question to you, obviously, the College Football Playoff Committee has changed their format from 4 teams, which it was for about 9 years, 10 years. And now we're at a 12-team playoff format. So you get those first 4 teams get a bye, and then the other 8 play that first round on college campuses. We saw that a couple weeks ago. You had Alabama at Oklahoma, Miami at A&M, and then you had obviously, for whatever reason, we want to put Group of Fives in, and you got Tulane and James Madison.
Those are quality games.
Getting belted. Quality games with quality teams that for sure deserve to be in the playoff, right?
I was into it. I was just watching the game, laser focus. Great competition.
It's like Oregon going up 34-3 at half was so entertaining. I could not take my eyes off of the screen. I did not watch the second half of that football game. But Jackson, I want to ask you, do you like the 12-team playoff format just in general, like with 12 teams, or could it be good with some sort of modification? Like, what's your overall thoughts on the 12-team playoff?
So I think the biggest problem with the 12-team playoff is, first of all, just how they figure out who goes in. Because it's like 1 year they're going off of this qualification. This is the most important thing that they're looking for. And then the next year, there's this other thing that they're really focusing on. It's not really consistent.
Just the criteria.
Yeah. So, like this year, we didn't put the best 12 teams into the playoffs. So what is a playoff? It's like you put the best teams in to chase the championship, to chase the glory of the season. So I think that's the biggest. The amount of teams, I think every single year, if you add, if we go to 16 or whatever it may be, 32, or we go into March Madness type of things in basketball.
They want to go to 16. Huge. I think they already had either a vote or just discussions in general on going to 16. Like, why do you want to go? But
then that 17th team is going to be the Notre Dame.
Every single year, you're going to have that last team that gets left out is just going to, they're going to feel like they should have gotten in. You're not fixing any fairness. Yeah. In fact, you're making it less fair, I feel like, by saying, okay, your regular season doesn't matter. You doing however well you did, maybe Texas in the SEC doesn't matter because James Madison can win their pathetic conference and get in. Yeah. I think you bring up such a great point with getting the best teams in because, that's not what this is. You can't say that James Madison and Tulane would beat Texas or beat Notre Dame. Make the argument for Vanderbilt at that point.
Yeah, well, also, speaking of Texas, I remember watching when they beat, who was it? I can't remember. Anyways, it was at the end of one of their games, and the head coach was, saying that we should,
it was
us
A&M.
losing
It was A&M right there at the end.
It was us losing to Ohio State. That's something that should be, And I'm like, you lost the football game. It doesn't matter. You need to win football games.
So I understand his point from the whole idea of if we're going to penalize teams for scheduling tougher games, then why would anyone schedule a tougher game? So I understand that part of it. At the same time, just beat Florida at Florida. And watch Florida right now. They're falling apart. They're starting quarterbacks in the portal. They're starting running backs in the portal. It's kind of falling apart for them right now. Not to say that they might not be able to kind of
They went
figure it out
overtime
eventually.
with Kentucky, and then who was it? What was the other team?
I know they allowed like 30-something to Arkansas at one point.
So, they did not have a strong win.
It was Mississippi State. They went to overtime with Mississippi State.
Exactly. So Kentucky and Mississippi State are two teams.
Not exactly your elite teams in the SEC.
Definitely not the cream of the crop. So
for sure.
But those are two. That was my biggest thing overall. That I feel like that's changed in terms of. I feel like with a 4-team playoff, it was much more it's the best 4 teams. It's of this year, it's the Georgia, the Ohio State, the Indiana, Oregon, the best 4 teams. And it wasn't really debatable because you saw throughout the season they won the games that mattered. But now you have the Texases and the whatever, like, oh, well, we played sort of good one game, but then we're over here struggling. It's not. Yeah,
it comes back to the whole idea of like handle your own games, handle business. Well, a couple years ago, remember Georgia got knocked out of the playoffs. I'll bring that up in just a minute because we lost to Alabama by 3 points.
Yeah.
And while there's so many arguments of hey, Georgia was probably one of the 4 best teams that year, I'd go that far to make that argument. But again, topic for another time. If you just win the game, then we're not having this discussion. I feel like that's kind of the way Kirby and coaches like Kirby or from Saban look at handling that. Whereas some other coaches, like I don't like blame a coach for trying to plead their case to be let into the playoffs, like Sark did. But at the same time, handle business. Don't lose to Ohio State when they're. honestly, I think they're a good team. They're talented, but that's the first game of the year. I know Texas is facing the same thing. Neither of them are really a polished team at that point. You got a lot of things you could probably take advantage of. Probably a lot of inexperienced players on that Ohio State team, given they lost so many after the championship run last year. And then, we beat the crap out of them. I think we're a much better team than Texas. Yeah. Maybe not even from a talent standpoint, but just at that point of the year, absolutely. But it's almost like if they lose those games by that's fine. We can overlook that if you just beat Florida. And if you just beat Florida, you'd be in. I do think, like you said, criteria is not as laid out, or when it is, it changes too often. So they beat 3 top 10 teams. They beat Vanderbilt when they were number 9. They beat A&M when they were number 3. And they beat one other. Do you remember who the other top 10 team was? I can't think of who it was off the top of my head.
No.
I know they beat another top 10. It'll come to me in just a minute. But anyway, I just think you've got to have a consistent criteria. Georgia, going back to that whole example, loses the SEC championship by 3 in 2023, gets bumped back 5 spots, and they're out of the playoff. Yeah. Whereas Alabama can lose an SEC championship by 21 and it be their 3rd loss, but they don't move at all.
Yeah.
I understand that it's 4 teams versus 12 teams, and it's like, I like the idea of you don't get penalized for the SEC championship or for losing it. At the same time, if you lose by 21, that's got to count for something.
But I will argue, I do think Alabama, I think the wins that they had were much better than Texas. Were much better because Alabama went. I can't remember the stretch, but I know Oklahoma was in there, Missouri was in there.
It was Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Tennessee, and at the time, those were each top 15. I want to say.
Yeah, and they're all. Vanderbilt was in contention for the playoffs. Texas in contention for the playoffs. Georgia in the playoffs. So they're in every single one of those teams. They went to that same, other than Vanderbilt. They were away and they came out of every single one of those games winning, and at sometimes the underdog. So I definitely do think Ty Simpson, I still think he's a very good quarterback. I hate him for thinking, being a little sissy and putting
the hedges.
So
someone brought up a good point on my page that Georgia Tech tore up the hedges in 2016 when they beat us, and they haven't beaten us since. So maybe this can be the start of a really long losing streak for Alabama against Georgia.
That would be nice.
It was Oklahoma, the team that Texas beat, the other top 10. I had to think of it for a second, but it came up. But yeah, I think Ty Simpson, when he's not pressured, he's a very accurate quarterback.
Yeah.
I could tell early on watching him against Florida State, not saying he exactly played a great football game, but he wasn't the problem. Like, you could tell from the start that his mechanics were pretty good, and that doesn't tell the entire story, but it's like you can tell a lot off a player based off of certain things like that.
And this is something that I want to, I think about all the time with college football is the mentality for fans, especially, to jump ship. And I've done this with, Mike Bobo, and I think the majority of Georgia fans have. We became just used to screen football and, kind of have learned, that sort of offense. But just overall, of all fan bases in college football, for an example, Alabama starting against Florida State and getting demolished by them, everybody's fired aboard. What is this going on? And then the rest of the season they take care of business, and then it's there's not. I feel like that's definitely something that's changed, especially in perspective of fan bases. For some reason, we live in Georgia, and I'm seeing a bunch of Indiana fans. There's an Indiana flag in my neighborhood. I'm like,
since when was your Indiana flag up?
Yeah, that's never been a thing. And bandwagoning's always been a thing, but it seems like there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks, and
I'm
coaches
guilty
and
of
stuff
that.
like that.
Before you actually came over here to do this, I had just posted a video where it was me saying one of the biggest lessons I've learned this year just from talking about Georgia football and kind of being one of those people out there is don't be so quick to judge assistant coaches. And I remember last year I just could not stand Mike Bobo.
Yeah.
And I took some time over the offseason to kind of think about it, because if you don't really have evidence or good reasoning for your claim, then what does it mean?
Yeah.
So what do we look at last year with Mike Bobo? Both your starting jump ball deep threat wide receivers are out in Colby Young and Raw. Both out by week 5. Colby Young didn't play a snap all year. Your offensive line wasn't very good. You have some players who are playing in the NFL right now, but just as a unit, it really wasn't a great unit all put together.
Yeah.
Carson Beck's not a great leader, and it's not to say that he doesn't have a lot of potential as a quarterback through the IQ he has. He has good football IQ. He had some bad games, but more than that, he just wasn't a great leader. I think you were on that bandwagon, not really bandwagon. You were on that train.
Yeah.
Pretty early on, saying he's not a great leader. Seeing it against, I think, Florida and Ole Miss was a pretty bad stretch for him last year. Ole Miss, everyone played poorly. But, just things like that. And then your running game wasn't exactly elite. Trevor Etienne's a good running back. He really was. I think he is underappreciated. Now, imagine if we had him this year with Frazier and Etienne, or Frazier and Bowens. That would be an elite group. But, I don't blame him for going to the NFL. He's had some decent
Which I also
games
think
with the Panthers.
Our running back room, as well as just our offensive line in terms of running efficiency and being able to, yards per rush is, and I'm not sure of the statistic, but I feel like it is much better this year. I feel like our running game has been
consistently in the 4.5s and up in that level. Ole Miss the first time ran the ball 49 times, 4.5 yards a carry, something like that, 220 something yards. You didn't get that last year with Georgia. You haven't had that consistency as a run offense in a long time.
And secondary, I think going on the other side of the ball, secondary's been great.
Yeah, secondary's really coverage. Improved.
I mean, you had a bunch of young guys that have now been matured, and with Kirby Smart as their coach, you can learn a few things. So I think they've definitely matured in so many different areas. KJ's been a star, and then with our linebacker core and everything like that. So. And then obviously, and that was listening to the podcast, the radio,
the show they do every Thursday.
And I kept telling Marshall, I listen every single week, and I'm always paying attention to the questions. And every single week, it's Ask Kirby Smart for an hour, and they'd ask him, how do we get more pressure on the quarterback? How do we get our defensive line to get off blocks more and whatever? And he's like, guys, there's nothing that we can do right now. It's just we need to do our jobs. Yeah. We need to. You put so much focus on it. Same for starting hot. If you put so much focus on it, then they tell themselves that they can't do it. So it's in a way we just got to go out and play our ball, play free, and have fun. And we ended up adjusting to that. Mississippi State is really, in my opinion, where the season changed.
That's where it switched. That's where it switched 100%. I think we just needed one really good game, and we would carry that momentum. I mean, momentum is a real thing. People don't, I think, pay as much attention to it. Like, oh, you have a good game here. That doesn't mean you're going to play well in your next game. I mean, you don't know what's going on inside that locker room, though. Like things can definitely change.
Which goes into why, bye weeks can hurt a team.
We are going to get into that, actually, in a couple minutes, I think. But the other point I wanted to bring up is like Glenn Schumann. That defense did not look good for those first couple weeks. I mentioned this on another clip I just posted earlier today from a podcast I did last week, and just saying like you can't really critique these guys so early in the year. Now, if the year's passed and there's like glaring issues, fine, let's have that conversation. But what I've learned is when you've got so many younger players and just injuries too, like along the offensive line, inexperienced players like your corners, Ellis Robinson, fantastic player now. He didn't look so great at the beginning of the year. It just goes to show these guys are there for a reason. Kirby has these guys there for a reason because they know how to win football games. Trust those coaches to figure it out. And I give a lot of credit to Dante Williams, the corners coach, because that group has done a complete 180. I give credit to Trey Scott and Coach Uzo Duribe for the way they've turned around that pass rush, and Glenn Schumann, obviously, for being the lead guy in that group, really. Just finding new ways to get to the quarterback. And one reason for that, that we've gotten to the quarterback so much more, that I've really come to hear more people say, and just kind of thinking back on it, it's like it makes sense. Like we can think back to the Georgia-Tennessee game as an example of this. You had to drop your linebackers into coverage so much. You had to drop a lot of players into coverage to where it takes away from what you can do from a pass rush standpoint. I believe it was Brooks Austin mentioned that you were having to drop 8 of your 11 players on defense against them. And you look back at that game, I don't even think that, obviously it's been so long since they've played Georgia, so they've got a bit of a chip on their shoulder, and it feels like 3 years ago. That game came down to the fact that Georgia had a very hurt offensive line, a very inexperienced defense, and honestly, Gunnar Stockton and Mike Bobo willed Georgia to victory that game. So that was pretty cool. I did want to switch gears a little bit right here with this next question, kind of switching gears. It's almost on the same path. But obviously, right now, December is a pretty crazy month for college football. Got a lot of coaching changes, the Lane Kiffins of the sport. You got a lot of teams that are just, like we mentioned with Florida, falling apart, losing players. The playoffs are obviously something you got to deal with. How do you attack bowl season? Has NIL really had an impact on how coaches and teams approach December as far, again, bowl games, the playoff, again, coaches getting fired, going to new places? What does that change? How does that change with NIL?
Yeah, I think I can't even put into words my frustrations in terms of just what I've experienced with NIL and the way it's changed college football for me. And even for my family.
I've had to hear that, by the way, for 4 years now. So.
For my family, I mean, my grandfather's a South Carolina fan, and now with, with conference realignment and scheduling and all these different things, gladly now we're going to play USC for the next few years. But, that rivalry was a huge event for our family and things like that. But to say, I think NIL has hurt I call it the tailgating fan, the fan who comes and will drive up to Athens, drive to Tuscaloosa, drive, Auburn, Alabama, wherever it is, and just wants to watch some good football, have a tailgate with their friends and even with the foes of the other team, because that's their tradition and that builds community. And I think that's kind of gone, because if you're not a fan who is completely locked in and die hard into knowing each player, and because every single year you have 20, 30, 40 guys coming in and out of every single team, you don't get to know the players. The team changes every single year. Coaching staff changes every single year, which has happened, before NIL. But I think, overall, there's so many different things that one can talk about with the effects of name and image and likeness and conference realignment and all these different things. But I feel like the person who's taking the brunt end of it is just going to be that tailgating fan, because the ACC, you got Clemson playing Stanford. What history do those teams
None.
do? And how are you going to go over to your neighbor's house and watch the game? That's the point of sports, is not in my opinion, and I don't know if this is unpopular, but I would like to see, what people think, but I would much rather watch a Georgia versus South Carolina, even though we're horrible, or a Tennessee versus, Vanderbilt or something like that. I would much rather watch one of those games because I understand the community and the history is just so deep and rich than watch a top 10 matchup between, Oregon and, say, Pitt's a top 10. That's just not very interesting to me because while that game is all highlighty and, starstruck and all these different things, it's just, not what football's about at the end of the day. So, which I think that's in a way why NFL's gotten a lot more, it seems, has gotten a little bit bigger.
And it was weird. For a couple years, it was really trending towards college football.
Yeah.
I think last year's a pretty big pivotal year for the sport because you're adding in the 12-team playoff. You're doing conference expansion everywhere. Yeah. You're getting rid of the Pac-12. And even though I'm not a Pac-12 apologist, that's still part of college football.
Yeah.
And again, I don't care about Vanderbilt or Missouri or those games that much, but you're right. It has meaning to it. I'm glad we get South Carolina back. I'm upset that we lose the Tennessee game because that's an effect of you add two teams to the conference, and there's pros and cons.
And I don't even understand. I haven't really heard an argument against it, but in terms of SEC, what's wrong with the East and the West? That keeps I really do enjoy the NFL divisional setup, and it's kind of complicated because then you're going to kick teams out. We can't have 36 teams in a division and then a play. There's only so many teams that can fit into a division, but. It's something that adds so much to it because those teams will fight every year in and year out, every single year, and they will grow a hatred and a history.
I think the main
That's
reason
what makes it fun to watch.
I think the main reason that they don't do that is because they want to have the two best teams in. To be fair, there have been several years where the best team from the East and the best team from the West. One of those teams was one of the best two teams in the conference throughout the regular season, and one of them just plain didn't deserve to be there,
Yeah.
So I think that's what they're trying to eliminate with it. But I do agree, it is fun to have a consistent, hey, you're playing these teams every year.
Yeah.
See if you can get through. I love the East and West setup. I do hear the people from maybe those West teams that say Georgia had an easy path. But here's what you can do. You can reset the divisions to, I don't know, maybe make it more fair for both sides. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I think it's a good thing still to have those two best teams playing for it. What it does in some ways, though, is it makes if you lose one SEC game, in a lot of cases you're out of the SEC championship. Yeah. Georgia and Alabama were lucky to make it this past year, and honestly, Georgia was really lucky last year
because the SEC beats itself up. Kirby says
this is
constantly.
This is true. Every time he talks about a crazy game or an overtime game, he says this another day in the SEC. I think that's what he said after the crazy Ole Miss round one. But it's just these Big Ten teams. Ohio State doesn't have to play anybody all year.
Yeah.
Indiana doesn't have to play anybody all year, and I'm not talking about the occasional Oregon or the occasional Texas. For 10 games, they don't play anybody.
Yeah.
And it's how do you expect us to really treat you like you're as good as these SEC teams? You're not.
Yeah.
Texas didn't have a good year. They won 3 top 10 games, so I'll give them credit for that. That part was good. They also had some really bad losses.
Yeah.
And they held the Big Ten second best team to 14 points.
Yeah.
So, and that was the first week of the season. So, I don't know. I just think there's so much crazy stuff going on surrounding conference realignment. It's not even that there's a lot of good things that come from this. I do think that Texas and Oklahoma being in the SEC, I think it helps them a lot because now they're able to recruit higher talent players. I think it's better for us because you had 2 potentially high caliber teams to the conference. It makes games more interesting, and I can understand that. Another thing that NIL and Portal have done is the talent distribution. Who cares, first of all, if you're Kirby and Georgia should be furious about the way this is played out because if it weren't for NIL and Portal, we would have the number 1 class, I'd guarantee you, every single year.
Yeah.
So what some people will point to, though, as I was about to say, is that talent distribution is more even from team to team. So it does make for a more competitive, more interesting, less blowout sort of thing. At the same time, is that really fair to the teams that have a much better program and much more process-driven focus, like Georgia?
Yeah.
It makes teams like Miami, who just have a bunch of money but don't really have that process-driven focus, it rewards them for just having a lot of money. So that's what I think it kills the sport.
In a way, to me, I've kind of drawn bland to all the turmoil, all the crazy, upsets and this, that. And the
upsets don't mean as much.
Yeah, because when I would hear Vanderbilt upsetting somebody. Obviously, Vanderbilt's a good, program now because of their coach and because of how he does, he coaches very similar to Kirby, but the upset is just not, it's no more anymore. And it's really, to me, it's not entertaining as a fan because it happens every single week. And plus, not to mention, you have different teams every single year. So you have Miami's good this year, and then they're nothing next year. Yeah. Then, you have Clemson coming in, they suck this year, then who knows what they're going to be next year. Or whatever, you have constantly different teams that are coming in and out of that. And it becomes just kind of bland, in my opinion. Obviously, as being a Georgia fan, it's nice to be on top, but we weren't always on top. Growing up, we were not on top. And I enjoyed it just as much because, then we grew into that and we won our national championships, and then we stepped down, once the time comes. But that's something that I become bland because it's, big upset every single week.
And I think there needs to be a new
word. It's not even upset anymore.
Part of why that used to matter was because it was a 14 playoff. Yeah. Like if Oregon got upset by, I think it was Stanford one year, and I think it pretty much knocked them out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Georgia a couple years ago lost to South Carolina, and they would have had to be perfect throughout the rest of the season to make it. They weren't perfect. They played that 2019 LSU team, which debate for another day on what would happen with some, historic matchups.
Yeah,
but
that's crazy.
I guess just the point being, the thing that has really hurt college football through all of this is your upsets don't matter as much, your regular season doesn't matter as much, and you don't have like the tradition of your normal conferences, your normal divisions. And most conferences have moved away from a division format, which I get both sides of that argument. I can go either way. I think it's good to have it to where your two best teams play because that makes sense to me. Yeah. But I also understand the argument of you've got so much history.
But then
in the
even
divisions.
those championships don't even matter anymore. So it's like, why are we even playing?
And I do like, though, they don't really matter, so that's true. But they're not going to hurt you. Like I said, hate that Alabama got what would seem to us as unfair treatment because of how he got treated 2 years ago. Yeah. But I like the precedent of, hey, you can lose your SEC championship and not be completely kicked out for it because it should be a positive thing and an honor to make that game, even if you lose it. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit, moving from the playoff and then NIL onto a little bit more specifically Georgia and Ole Miss and Gunner. Gunner played started his first game ever last year in the Sugar Bowl. Yeah. Not often does your first career start come in a playoff game or at a New Year's Six Bowl. He got both of those in one. This is the second round of the college football playoffs. I would argue Gunner's no stage is too big at this point for Gunner to not be able to, he knows what he's going up against. He's been doubted on for so long, and I mean he's finally getting his chance to fully lead his own team to a national championship because even last year the team loved him. The team really rallied behind him. Kirby wasn't afraid to say that ever. Even from the start, he was like, yeah, these guys play harder from him or for him. And you're like, is this a shot at Beck or is this a compliment to Gunner? And I think it's kind of a little bit of both, honestly. That's what I would say. I don't know if everyone would agree with that. Yeah. But really my question is, since his first start last year against Notre Dame, he threw for 200-something yards. His completion percentage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad either. Yeah. Threw a touchdown. Fumbled the ball once or twice, but that wasn't really his fault. But I think he played a pretty solid game. But anyway, how has he changed or improved since that first game last year in the second round of the playoffs?
I think he's just become his own quarterback. He's become his own person. He's, I think even at the start of this year, we kind of saw him, a little bit indecisive, maybe a little bit, kind of just careful with his decisions and careful with what he was doing. Whenever I saw him, run with, take off with the ball, I saw him ready to hit and ready to play his own football. And I didn't really see that early in the season. And then, of course, kind of last year with, his decisions as a quarterback. But then I kind of, throughout the year, as he, weathered the storm, I think he kind of just became his own player. And now, he is a veteran quarterback in a way.
Having He's got so much experience under his belt just through a whole season.
Yeah, well, and I also think, that's a great, benefit of being under Kirby Smart. That's, and, having a great, practices set up and a good coaching staff and wide receivers and everything behind you. But I also think the thing that sets him apart from the talent, because we have guys behind him that are, just as talented and who are going to be starting, if not next year, but the year after that, who are just as good. I think one thing that sets him so far apart from many other quarterbacks is just his leadership abilities. And, obviously as a quarterback, you are thrust into the leadership position. There's no way to, step aside from that. But, I mean, you can just see the way that he carries himself on the field. The moment that as he stepped on, many, ESPN analysts have said that, that was the change that Georgia needed, was when he got hit and he got right back up. I mean, that is like a documented moment.
The number of times that he has been hit and it looks like he is just dead on the ground and he gets right back up and plays the next down. I'm sure Kirby and Mike Bobo hate it because they watch their leader go down every single time. They're like, oh no, he gets right back up. He's played through just some gruesome hits this entire year. That's one thing that as a football player you love to see, is when you've got a quarterback who's willing to get hit, but also willing to go hit somebody. You watch it in that first game he ever played in, a sufficient amount, was that Texas game, the 2024 SEC Championship. I believe it's the first drive of the game. He has already just thrown a bullet of a pass to Arian Smith. It's like 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, lowers his shoulder, runs over the Texas player, gets the first down, and he gets up and he lets that Texas player know what he just did to him. Like he's up in his grill, like yelling at him. And it was awesome. I just loved to see just, bring some fire to the quarterback position. I will take the potential drop-off, and I say potential because Gunner, from a throwing perspective, has been very efficient this year. Maybe not exactly your best as far as getting the most yards per game, most passing yards per game, which, who cares if you're winning games and holding on to the ball.
That's not even Georgia football. I remember, I can't even remember who the coordinator was, but I was watching the game a long time ago when I was a kid. It was 50-50. We'd run the ball and pass the ball, run the ball, pass the ball. It was literally, that was the approach. Was it Cheney? No.
It could have been Cheney.
I think it was Cheney.
I think that was something.
Big round guy.
That's Cheney.
I think that's who it was.
Cheney was pretty big on trying to,
keep it 50-50, which doesn't really make any sense. But
it depends on the game, but I don't mind it either because it's like you're just trying to keep them guessing. They never know what's coming at you.
But that's, in my opinion, that's Georgia football. Everybody always talks about explosive plays and the ability to do that, but that's never been Kirby Smart football. That's never been Georgia football.
Methodically march the ball down the field.
Yeah, and
that's what we did against Alabama.
You time them out. Maybe you don't come out. Tennessee. You're down by a lot. Auburn. Whatever these different situations are. You're down in the first half, but you continue to play. You don't get scared. You don't abandon your.
That's one thing
approach.
That's been crazy about this team that I don't think I've ever seen it with another Georgia team. Is they I'm not saying other Georgia teams would quit, but literally with this team, Kirby, one of the I guess things he said all year is we're hard to kill.
Yeah.
And you really are. You look at Auburn, you're down 10 early in the game. They're about to score, punch the ball out. Go score 20 unanswered to end the game.
Yeah.
Ole Miss, you're down 9. You need a 4th and 1 from Josh McCray. You get it. And you can look at all these moments and how many plays away we are from really being like 9-3 or 8-4 at this point. But it doesn't matter. Georgia doesn't think about it like that. It's okay. Until Georgia is mathematically out of the game, until it's impossible for them to win, they're still in the game, and I wouldn't bet against Georgia.
Well, and the guys, I feel like they just have, to say, unwavering faith. They're like...
Jameis Winston, he is a diehard Jameis Winston fan.
He needs to start over. Where is he now? He's
at the Giants.
Right?
So, actually, this is funny. He's been a diehard Jameis Winston fan, but I've decided every week that I've done the Pick'em, the college Pick'em, the ESPN thing, and I put a graphic up, I use a Jameis Winston quote every week since week 3 has been my... philosophy on that, and it's worked pretty well. I had a pretty good pick 'em. I don't know how my Bowl Mania is doing right now. I'll have to go check that. But
I kind of forgot to do that. Whoops. I didn't mind see it, the championship one.
Yeah. What did you have for that first round? What were your picks?
So I had Alabama winning. I did not think Oklahoma could go twice, beating them. I had Oregon beating JMU, but I did have Tulane beating Ole Miss. And the only reason is because I didn't know how Ole Miss was going to respond to not having. And also, Ole Miss is in a hard place to play. Tulane football, they still have their coach. He was allowed to finish the year.
He was allowed to finish the year, then he's heading to Florida.
Yeah, so I do think, he's a quality coach. Tulane's an okay football team.
So we get it. You made a horrible pick for that game. Yes. What did you do for Miami, Texas?
I had Texas A&M.
I did too.
But I also think Miami is going to get absolutely obliterated.
See, I think they present a good challenge to Ohio State. on the fields that they're going to have a relentless pass rush. That front seven maybe for Miami has been pretty good all year.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues have been in other places. And if you look at Miami, like through 5 weeks of the year, they were a lot of people would say they were the best team in the country, even though they were sitting at number 2. Like for a minute there, if you had matched them up with Ohio State, a lot of people would probably have picked Miami in that game. They had several first-place votes, I believe, in the AP.
Which I've never really hopped on that. I mean, I think the majority of it just comes from Carson Beck being the quarterback. I've never really disliked a quarterback so much than Carson Beck. I only pay attention to him when he does bad. So what was it, the Louisville game where he threw 4 picks and then blamed it on somebody?
And we've talked about this a couple times, I think. But the thing I keep going back to is it's not exactly blaming it's not exactly the whole idea of your receiver ran the wrong route that's an issue. Like I had a friend come up to me and say that was crazy for him to say that. And my honest response was, well, I mean, that's a true possibility that the receiver could have run the wrong route, that could have thrown off the play. 100% realistic football scenario. No issues with that being a possibility. My issue is with the fact that you as the starting quarterback of your team, after a crushing upset, go to the media and tell them that the receiver ran the wrong route.
Yeah.
That is the opposite of being a leader.
Yeah.
And then I remember, I believe it was after the SMU game, not 100% sure, but he went on and said, I just call the plays I run the plays that are called. I execute the plays that are called.
Yeah.
It's like, take a little bit of accountability. It's like part of being a leader is you don't necessarily, it doesn't have to all fall on you, but take responsibility for what you could have done better. And he just has not done a good job of that.
And there's ways to just, I mean, you can tell that he's trying to deflect it off of himself because, he's not putting it on himself. So, but overall, I think I've never seen anything out of Carson Beck. I mean, he can put up stats, he can do whatever. He's not going to win football games.
Yeah.
That's just wholeheartedly.
A lot of my reasoning for not having them go very far, I actually had them losing to A&M. I wasn't shocked that Miami won, but I didn't expect it either.
Going into Kyle Field is quite the task.
But I mean, my whole thing was Carson Beck, I don't trust him if I'm a Miami fan to string together 4 good enough games to win the national championship. Yeah. Could he play a game in that stretch that's good enough to win the national championship? Sure. Yeah. I just don't see him doing it 4 straight times. He's just inconsistent. He's got a lot of potential. I'll even give him credit for the fact that the way he's treated Georgia since he left, not as far as his actions, but as far as he has not come out and trashed us on interviews. Like he's been pretty laid back and respectful to us on interviews. So that's kind of in my mind help me have a little bit more of a favorable image. Bare minimum, right? It's not, given some of the things he's done, he could just sit here and be talking all this crap about Georgia. He hasn't done that, and I'll give him credit for that. But again, I just think it's a lot of inconsistency.
I don't even know where they are in this whole bracket. Are they even, would we even play them?
If we beat Ole Miss and Miami beats Ohio State, we would play Miami in the Fiesta Bowl next Thursday.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe
that's not going to happen. But
not going to happen, but it's possible, which is crazy.
That would be cool.
Sure, the playoff committee set it up like that so that would be a possibility. Because I think they're kind of in the same idea. I do think the playoff committee will move matchups around so that they don't get rematches immediately, but also so that they get some of the matchups they want.
Yeah.
I believe a couple years ago, or not even a couple years ago, this year, I'm kind of thinking about a couple different things. This year, everyone knows that Georgia should have jumped Ohio State.
Yeah.
You can't sit here and tell me that after the regular season that they played, if you compare those two, even with Georgia's loss, it's pretty close. Then Georgia goes and beats a team that's really had their number for 3 years now, or for a longer time than that, but consecutively 3 years. Had their number, and they go and beat them by 3 touchdowns to win the SEC, whereas Ohio State plays one of their first real teams of the year and scores 10 points and loses their conference championship. Now they have the same record. Georgia has a stronger strength of schedule and strength of record, but you're going to tell us that they're a team behind.
Yeah.
So that's crazy to me. The reason they did that is because honestly, no matter what way you do that, it's actually kind of going to be the same. But I think their idea is okay, Georgia would have to play Ole Miss. That'd be a rematch. Whereas if they're in the number 2 spot, they'd have to play Miami or A&M.
Yeah.
That could be pretty tough.
Yeah.
And I think probably part of the reason that Bama didn't really move was so that they wouldn't play Georgia immediately.
Yeah.
I think this has kind of been set up in a way to where the playoff committee wants to see, maybe not wants to see a Georgia-Bama national championship. At the same time, like if Georgia and Bama meet in the national championship, everyone's going to be like, okay, this is so repetitive, but I love it because it's a good game every time.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to tune into that game, and they know that. A couple of years ago, TCU lost the Big 12 championship, but stayed at number 3. They didn't move at all, and they moved Ohio State in at 4. That was the right move to have Ohio State in at 4. I truly believe it. And I think the 4 teams that made it that year were Georgia. I know this actually. Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State in that order, and then they had Bama and Tennessee right outside at 5 and 6. And a lot of the critique was, why didn't TCU move? I would argue that they wanted a Ohio State-Michigan rematch for the national championship. Now, would a rematch in the semifinals had probably done some pretty good numbers? Yeah, I would argue that. But I think they were kind of trying to set it up for the national championship. So when both of those teams lost in the semifinals, they had no clue what to do. I don't know. I feel like sometimes they can move matchups around. We could have a deeper conversation.
We saw Georgia TCU went there.
We know what the real national championship was.
Matchup.
We know what the real national championship was that year. And that's something that I do hear every now and then. It's like TCU didn't deserve to be in. They played I'm not going to say flawless regular season. They didn't lose a game. But it's like there were a bunch of close games against bad teams, so that's true. But they went undefeated. They lost their conference championship by 3, and then they beat the winner of the Big Ten, who was the number 2 team undefeated at the time in Michigan. So they deserve to be there. Georgia's just a lot better team than TCU.
I'm curious. So that was post NIL. Like that was
post NIL. That was 2 years, or really not even fully 2 years after NIL was allowed.
Yeah. So I think that's an example of a team. Because here's TCU in the national championship beating Michigan, and then. Now where are they?
That's a good point. So, I think a lot of it was kind of the stars aligning for them at that point. I think Sonny was a good coach.
I don't even know any of their players. I don't even know.
I don't have a single one of their players. From there. Max Duggan. Now that's done well in the NFL. Quentin Johnson's really the only one I could for sure point to.
And you might have some guys, sure, but I don't think in my opinion, one of probably the best rosters right now is Ohio State. Their defense has, probably 3 or 4 guys that are going to be, in the first round of the NFL draft. Their offense is obviously, I think Bo Jackson, their running back, is crazy every single time he gets the ball. He's a freshman. Him and Chauncey are definitely, in my opinion, probably the 2 best freshman running backs that I've watched all year. And they were both insanely explosive, and they hit very, very hard. They're the definition of a running back. And that would be an awesome guy to pick up if Georgia could, but I know he's going to stay there. But both of them kind of came on the scene, a little bit later in the season or halfway through the season. So I'm excited to see, how this playoff kind of fizzles itself out, but I think it's going to be pretty, the top 4 teams.
I'm excited for this next round. I really am, because you get it's such a great time of year. When you go from December, if you're a football fan, December to January is the best time you can have. You've got the conference championships, you've got that first round of the playoffs, you got obviously, you got the whole college football playoff, but you get Christmas, you get New Year's Eve with one good playoff game, and then you've got the next day where you've got, again, 3. You get the Rose Bowl on the same day that you get the other 2.
Wasn't it used to be where we had the games on New Year's Eve and then New Year's Day?
It always depended. So the way they've switched it now is every single New Year's Six Bowl is a playoff game, which is good because you get more meaningful games. Or those games each mean more. At the same time, if you don't make the playoffs, your bowl game just does not matter. Whereas before, if you didn't make the playoffs, but you were playing in a New Year's Six, winning the Rose Bowl is still a big deal, even if it's not a playoff game. But now, obviously, every New Year's Six is a playoff game, which is a reason I like this idea that's been thrown out of having the second round also on college campuses, because then you get those semifinals can be the alternating New Year's Six, and the other ones be
and also
other games.
Why is Georgia? They are the ones, or any of the top 4 teams. Why aren't they the ones getting the home field advantage? Why did they have to go somewhere and play? Especially if they have to wait.
That's such a big advantage that Ole Miss has right now. They're much closer to New Orleans than Georgia is. The fan turnout, I still think will be pretty even between the 2 teams, just because Georgia travels so well. Also, the biggest game in Ole Miss football history.
Yeah,
I would argue.
Yeah, and I think I'm curious on how Ole Miss is going to rally behind this new football team. Obviously they've hired from within, so it's going to be,
there's some buy-in for sure. There's some unity.
But I'm curious, how the fan base feels going into this game. I mean, it's definitely a different. And they played Tulane last week, which is like that's a team you played.
I do feel like at this point though, I would almost rather play a team like Tulane and have a bit of rhythm heading into this game than to be sitting at home for a couple weeks. Now it does give you the chance to get healthy, which is what Georgia needed.
What Dan Lanning say, when he was talking, when he figured out that they were 5 and they had to play JMU, he was thrilled. He was very excited because he knew that he was able to build momentum with JMU, work out any kinks they had. I don't know, they had injuries, which is a part of football.
This year will be very telling for kind of what spot is like the premier spot to have in the playoffs. Ohio State obviously won it last year at number 8. I think more than anything, it just comes down to who's playing the best football heading into the playoffs, or not even heading into the playoffs. Who can catch fire like first, I guess, if that makes sense. Ohio State blew out Tennessee last year in the playoffs. None of those other teams playing in that first round really like shocked anybody or like had a big matchup, I guess. And they captured momentum with that first game and just carried it. And I think one thing Georgia's done as the season has ended, they started to slowly catch momentum these last couple games. And I just hope these last couple weeks off hasn't kind of broken that up, because it's a long time to be off.
And I also think, obviously this isn't something that Kirby isn't, obviously going into every single practice, every single team meeting, everything with the intention of remembering the fact that we need to stay, using this momentum. But momentum just wears off, and it's you're not playing football. You can't do anything about that. He's not going to go into Sanford Stadium and make up a mock game like Vanderbilt tried to do. I mean, you can't really do much in this situation, and you can do what you can, but in some ways you just hit a wall of trying to prepare your guys. But I definitely do think we're going to come out like Georgia football, probably punt 3 and out first drive, kind of a wear and tear football, and I do think we'll take care of. I'm always, and we talked about this, I think it was today or yesterday, Georgia's 4-0 with Kirby Smart, with, having to rematch. But it's always hard to beat a team twice, and you're beating, you have a new coach who's able to have already had one game below his belt, which isn't anything, but having a game below his belt, having another week of preparation for Georgia, being able to situate himself a little bit better. I do think it'll be, closer than it even was the first matchup, maybe. But I also do think I have a whole lot more trust.
It'll be a lot lower scoring is the way I look at it. I think you mentioned the whole 3 and out thing. I do think this game, looking at it, I'm much more confident about the defense than the offense. Because the defense catching fire right there at the end of the year. Offense played pretty consistently and comparable to what it had been all year. With the exception of the Georgia Tech game, which was just not a great offensive performance. But I think looking at the fact that you've already played this game once, Georgia's offense can't fully change its identity to offset what Ole Miss is going to do on defense, whereas Ole Miss can make a couple small adjustments and really contain that Georgia offense. For the first time around, Georgia will be able to do the same to Ole Miss. So I do think that rematches will usually bode the defenses better, and over time that has. I would argue.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've definitely seen, as Georgia's gone throughout, as being a fan, is just how Georgia's defense and Georgia's approach to a football game is just wear and tear football. It's me versus you. It's not, I'm going to run around.
Who can be tougher in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of that's coming this year.
And fourth quarter's our quarter. I feel like every single time I was in Sanford Stadium, and we'd get done with with our lights and
he loves Turbulence by Steve Aoki.
It's the worst. Fire the DJ in Sanford Stadium.
No.
He is horrible.
No.
But what was I going to say? Yeah. So I definitely do think in some ways that Georgia football is just, it's a defensive team that's focused on just hard-nosed football, like we were talking about with running the ball. And this is something that a Georgia fan knows and expects. So, it kind of goes into when we were kind of getting frustrated with, the screenplays and everything like that. It wasn't Georgia football. and we weren't able to run the ball well, and we became kind of frustrated with our production on offense. So I just think, I'm excited to see, kind of what happens, and I think we'll take care of business.
One thing I think that brings up a point that kind of sparks for me is Georgia plays to a standard, whereas a bunch of these other teams will play down to their competition. Georgia will always play to a standard. Kind of struggled with that last year.
Yeah, that was what I said.
That was one of the years you've really kind of fallen off with that whole idea.
Yeah.
But this year for sure played to a standard.
Which plays into, I think, in a huge way, leadership. If you've ever been on a football team, or if you've ever been on a team in anything, you going into your match or your game or whatever, your leadership prepares each and every person mentally for the game, and you can tell a difference from this year and last year of how we approach every single game. And I think, we've been down how many times, especially early in the season.
Yeah.
Away, we were down so many times in the SEC, and we won every single game other than one of them, which was at home. But
we don't have to talk about that.
So and I really do think it's it's the leadership that gets you through that. It's another question that I kept hearing on that interview with Kirby that they had was, what adjustments do you make in the second half? And Kirby said, I don't make adjustments every single week. There's no adjustments that are made. Maybe minor things like, hey, you need to drop back in this.
Coach talk, let's be fair. So I think there's probably more than he wants to
That's
speak
true,
on.
but I there's not much. What can you do in 30 minutes where you have an offensive meeting, you have a defensive meeting?
It's going to be very minute details that change. They're not reinventing the wheel at halftime.
And it's not like Kirby's going to come out and say, all right, guys, we need to play harder this quarter. These players know that. Kirby might light a fire. He said, sometimes I got to light a fire. Sometimes I need to come in soft. There's different approaches that he has because he knows what his guys need. But, there's obviously minute adjustments, but the guys just settle in and they play Georgia football.
Yeah.
They get, and that's what happened halfway through the season, same halfway through the game. Through leadership and everything like that, they just settled into playing their football, and we started to win football games. So, and win them, not by being behind in the first half and punting the ball and, oh my goodness, are we going to win this game, holding our breath, but taking care of business and, tucking them in and singing them a song and then, beating them by just a good token. So, that's one big difference I think that we've seen, compared to last year.
Yeah, definitely. Playing to a standard, like I said, I think that's so crucial what Georgia's done so well this year, and that whole identity of, hey, you can get a play on us here, we're going to move on to the next play. One thing that Georgia does so well, and teams always try to take these acronyms and sayings and try to replicate them, but if you're not really practicing them, what does it matter? Georgia, one thing that I've focused on recently from Georgia.
Passion. Fire, energy.
FPE, fire, passion, energy.
Crap.
You were close. It doesn't matter. He got it close enough. But one thing they've done for quite a while now, which I've really focused on recently, is win. What's important now? WIN. And the way that they're so successful is they're not looking up at the scoreboard every play thinking, okay, we're down 10, we got to, do this, do that. Let's look at the scoreboard. They are not result driven, they are process driven. I kind of mentioned that a couple minutes ago, but just they're not exactly worried about what the outcome is going to be. Like they are, like that matters obviously, but that's not what's on their mind on every play. Every play is, how can I play this play to the best of my ability? How can I do my job to the best of my ability on this play? And that's what Georgia's done so well with over the years.
I think watching the demeanor of Georgia football players and compared to other teams, like I was watching, today where App State and Georgia Southern's on, and every single play the D linemen would be like this, yelling at each other. Never see that. Other than the very, very single events, like that one time where who was it? It was in the playoff game with Nakobe Dean or something like that.
And Channing Tindall.
Yeah. So there's times to where there's coaching up and what are you doing, but this is like an arguing, like you did this wrong, whatever. You never see that happening.
There's a lot of a difference between that you're arguing on this is your fault, this is your fault. Kirby's been caught on camera on audio one time, like in Athens, screaming on the microphone. And I believe it was Keely Ringo and Christopher Smith, because I think one of them was blaming the other for messing up, and that was the week of Georgia-Tennessee. Tennessee came in as the number one team. Georgia beat the crap out of them. Yeah. But it goes to show, that's not tolerated at Georgia. The whole idea of, hey, it's your fault, it's not my fault, they don't do that. Yeah. They're more of holding you accountable, like Nakobe Dean did. It's not like a, hey, you screwed up, this is all your fault. But it is also hey, you did miss on your assignment. go make a play.
Do this next time.
Go make a play. Yeah. Not like, man, that was your fault. That's not my fault. Like stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, shift gears a little bit. Last question of the day. What's your score prediction for Georgia Ole Miss?
That's always a hard one. With it being, an alt site, I think Georgia's definitely going to come off slow. It's pretty inevitable.
Slower than the first game.
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
I think it's definitely going to be inevitable. Ole Miss coming off of a big win. Big win. I'd say probably, 24. 24-18.
I like the range. I do like the lower scoring side of it. I'll record later and officially announce my score prediction with a little more explanation. I think I like a 10-point win, somewhere around there for Georgia. The spread's 6.5. I say a 10-point win. I don't think it'll be much higher scoring than the first. Yeah. Or it won't be higher scoring. It'll be a lot lower scoring than that first match. I'm thinking somewhere in like the 30s to 20s. Because you look at these teams, Georgia's obviously got a lot better defense. Ole Miss, I think, outside of the loss of Lane Kiffin, which is a major loss, they're pretty similar to what they were earlier in the year. Got all the same players, same coaching staff outside of him. Their offense is up there as far as points scored and yards per game. Yeah. They're still a very good offense.
Who did they beat this year?
They beat Oklahoma when they were, I don't remember what rank they were, but that was like a top 15 game.
Yeah.
When LSU was good, they beat LSU, and then LSU kind of fell off. They held it close with us, so I give them credit for that. They've had a good year. It's just, some of their stats do get inflated by the worst teams that they play.
Yeah.
I think they're a legit team. I think they're a legit offense. They'll score some points for sure. Like I said earlier, I think defenses really do bode better from the first matchup. But I got Georgia by about 10. Gave you the official number later. It's kind of going back and forth. The way I do this, I just kind of think about it throughout the weekend. I like this number, and then I hear a stat or someone tells me something, like, I might need to change that a little bit. But it's kind of a change thing. Well, Jackson, thank you so much for doing this episode with me. It's been a long time coming.
Fire the lady on College Game Day, whatever her name is. I want to make
He does not like Jess Sims at all.
Horrible.
He doesn't like Jess. He's very specific about the people he does and doesn't like with respect to.
She's horrible.
Take his word for it, guys. I guess. I don't know what to tell you. I have no hate towards Jess Sims, but he does not like her. So, but anyway, thank you guys for watching this interview. Jackson, thank you for doing it, and go Dogs. Thank you to Jackson for joining for this interview. We've been really talking about this for a long time, trying to get him on the show. And finally came on, got to ask him some questions. So that was great. I thank him so much for coming on and talking with me for about an hour. But now I'm going to send you guys to my interview with Hammy. We do this pretty much every week, every game week. And we're going to talk a lot about Ole Miss and a little bit about Georgia at the end and just an overall preview of this game. So I'm going to go ahead and send you all guys that way. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Saturday in Athens GA podcast and the Hammy Show. Hope you've all had a Merry Christmas, a great break, and today we're going to get into a little bit of Georgia Ole Miss preview. We've done a couple weeks kind of leading up to this, just slowly moving from Bama to Ole Miss. We knew it was going to be Ole Miss, like they weren't going to lose to Tulane, obviously. So we've been prepared for this, been looking forward to this for a while. Hammy, just before you get started, how you feeling about just the way this has kind of worked for Georgia, having the weeks off and now getting to play a team that we already played once in the year? What is this kind of what do you feel about this matchup?
Well, I mean, first you gotta hope everybody had a Merry Christmas, of course. And got to spend good time with family and friends. I know both of us did, and I'm hoping the players did the same. I know they got a little bit of a break. Talked to some people inside the facility, and that many of them were very thankful for getting home and opening gifts with their families and not sitting in Kirby Smart's office. So you gotta love a little break. I think it's a good, refreshing feeling for this team. I feel refreshed. I mean, we were running hard for 13 weeks straight with 2 byes and mixed in there, but man, every Saturday on a Saturday on a Saturday on top of another Saturday, it was college football, and that's what dominated our lives. So to have this sort of break, it's good for the fans. I think it's good for the team. I know it's the rest versus rust debate, and it does scare you a little bit, but this team, there's something just different about it. And I think what I've heard inside coming from practice, Kirby has those boys.
Physicality, man. They are hitting for sure these last couple weeks.
The videos coming leaked of Kirby on the mic have been some of his best work thus far. So I'm juiced for what this team is going to come out and look like in the Sugar Bowl come Thursday, New Year's Day at 8 p.m. in the Superdome in New Orleans. So I'm just juiced up. I think it's going to be awesome. It's always a fun time in New Orleans. And, we've got a bad taste in our mouth, and I think this team has a bad taste in their mouth after last year. Obviously, what happened against Notre Dame, but just the week leading up to it, the terrorist attack, everything was just downhill from the strike of the new year onto the January 1st and then the delay of game till the 2nd, whatever it was. I mean, it was just a nightmare
it was just
situation.
A horrible series of events.
Yes,
right before
and so I think just like the fans have a bad taste in their mouth about the city of New Orleans as a whole, I think this team has a seriously bad taste in their mouth regarding the outcome of last year against Notre Dame. So I think there is a little bit of revenge factor for this Georgia team this year.
Yeah, I think they even asked Gunner about that game, and Gunner doesn't really usually show much emotion in these press conferences, but he was pretty quick to say how it left a bad taste in his mouth and how he hated the way that ended. I think Nate Frazier kind of came out talking about just what it's like to be back in this game and moving closer and closer to that ultimate goal of a national championship. But yeah, I agree with that sentiment that a lot of people share of just that horrible memory, I guess, of New Orleans. Like when we were getting our seeding right. And remember last year, the 3 seed would go and play in the Fiesta Bowl. So I'm sitting here, we get put in number 3. I'm like, okay, that's cool. We'll go to Arizona in 3-4 weeks. And it's like, nope, you're going back to New Orleans, whether you like it or not. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I hate this place. And I mean, there's some cool things about it. Like we've had great memories there. We've also had not so great memories there. Obviously, it was just so horrific what happened the day before on that midnight of New Year's Day. You hope and pray that nothing like that happens again before this game. It's just a crazy world. But let's try to focus, on some happier things in the football and the matchup that we've got. But I think it's, again, worth bringing up. It's definitely a lot of things have happened in New Orleans with Georgia involved. Just it's a bunch of history, a lot of good, a lot of bad. Anyway, want to shift a little bit to just the specifics of the Georgia Ole Miss matchup itself. One of the bigger keys, one of the bigger pieces of this entire storyline of this game, and honestly, we've kind of been so used to it. I think it's kind of drowned a little bit, this whole narrative. But Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss in the middle of that playoff run to go to LSU, no sugarcoating it. Whatever reasons or whoever's side you're on in this whole thing, that's what happened. Lane Kiffin left his team. He's going to a new team before the playoffs were over, before they even started really for Ole Miss. But I wanted to ask you specifically about how this really might change, if it does, Ole Miss as a team. Does the absence of Lane Kiffin overall really change this matchup? What are some ways that Ole Miss not having him could really impact this game?
It's such an interesting question because we have now seen a product of Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin, and that was against Tulane. And largely, that was the exact same game that it was with Lane. Now that we are farther into the season and into the playoffs, both of those teams are entirely different, just like Georgia is entirely different since the first time we played Ole Miss. So obviously, the Lane thing is just its own outer body experience of the actual game on the field. The drama surrounding it, of course, that rips apart a locker room. But I think what Pete Golding's done he's glued it back together. And I think Ole Miss did the exact right thing in that whole situation. Their athletic director, their staff, those guys in that building truly mended something that could have gone horribly south, horribly fast. So I think Ole Miss obviously still has some maybe growing pains getting into the Pete Golding era, but it was just so abrupt when it happened in the beginning of it that you really didn't know what to expect. But like I said, they came out against Tulane and it was largely the same exact game. The first one was 45-10 and this one was 41-10, a 4-point difference. We saw that game earlier in the season. We've seen this Georgia Ole Miss game earlier in the season. I think personally the Georgia team is far more improved than we were when we played Ole Miss and we still got an 8-point victory. I think the defensive side of the ball is the biggest thing for Georgia. For Ole Miss, with Lane leaving, we didn't really see their offense kind of skip a beat, and their defensive coordinator is now their head coach in Pete Golding. So we probably won't see their defense skip a beat either, just because that defensive core has stayed together, that staff, those linebacker coaches, those DB coaches, things like that. Where I do think the Lane Kiffin thing hurts the most is not necessarily the culture, but just the rumors and the Trinidad Chambliss and Kawan Lacey, like those types of people that have trade or transfer portal rumors surrounding them, and they're swirling around that locker room. I think that's where it hurts the most. So it's not necessarily because of Lane leaving. I think they're playing with more of a fire under their ass because of Lane leaving, and I think they have something to prove. But with those players gone, I simply think, or with those players like having the rumors that they might be gone, I think that's what hurts, and that is a product of Lane Kiffin leaving.
I think these are all totally fair things to say. I think we actually see a lot of this matchup very similarly. And since I've kind of ramped up this analysis of Ole Miss and kind of looking at what am I thinking as far as the score, I always try to just really sit on that for a couple of days. Just do my best I can to really get as close as I can to what that final score might actually be. Not really that close most of the time, but I try my best. But kind of thinking about this game, the more and more I look at it, I have full confidence in Georgia, and I look at the defense, and everyone knows how Georgia's changed over the course of the season. But I personally don't think that Ole Miss, obviously not having Lane Kiffin, will impact them over time, and we'll see if they can keep what Lane has built in Oxford. I'm not going to say too much on that right now because that's not what's important. But I do think if you look at their team, Kirby obviously coaching talk kind of comes out every now and then. But you look at what he said about the team the other day. Ole Miss has all the same players outside of Lane. They have all the same coaches. Like, this is still a very good team that is really a 4th and 1 stop away in Athens from being potentially the SEC champion. You have no idea at this point in the year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're a very good football team, and the more I look at it, the more I think it, again, will be a Georgia victory. And I'm not going to say it's going to be like a nail-biter last drive sort of game like it was last time, but it's not exactly going to be a blowout like you might see some people predicting. I believe there was a betting market, can't remember which one it was, that had their most popular bet of the playoffs was for Georgia to cover 6.5. And I just kind of look at that and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, again, I think we've gotten a lot better than they have gotten better. I think if you look at since the first matchup, Georgia's very similar. Or I'm sorry, Ole Miss is very similar to what they were the first time. Georgia has improved in every facet of the game, but mainly defense. But that kind of leads me to my next point that I wanted to ask you. Outside of Lane, again, we all know what Georgia is. We've heard the storylines. We've heard the news and the narratives. Everyone knows what Georgia is at this point. If you're following Georgia football or you're a Georgia fan, you know that they've gotten better throughout the year. The offense has been pretty similar. It's gone up and down, but it's in a good spot. And then that defense has just really taken off of the pass rush, and the corners have started to play really well. But I wanted you to maybe inform our audience, I guess, a little bit on Ole Miss. Outside of the loss of Lane and the absence of Lane, how have they really changed as a team since that first matchup in October?
It's so funny because, like, I think in the game that we saw in Athens between Georgia and Ole Miss, we saw kind of the not necessarily birth of Gunner, because we had the Tennessee game when he stepped up to the plate and played in the clutch and delivered the best pass I've ever seen in Georgia football history. In a bucket pass to London Humphreys on 4th and 7. Like, you get that type of performance from Gunner, and that's obviously like, oh, he's here, he's arrived. But I feel like Ole Miss just solidified his case as, like, this kid can play in the clutch. Like, he delivers. What we did see, or what we didn't see, was Trinidad Chambliss answer in the clutch. And he hasn't really been tested yet again in the clutch because Ole Miss has kind of gone on a boat race in many of their games. He's obviously gotten better as the season's progressed. That was his first road SEC start, and I think a lot of the national media is focusing on that and blah, 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 talking about how Trinidad didn't know what it was like to play in front of 90,000 plus people in an SEC environment. So, yeah, he's got that experience under his belt. What I'm interested to see is if he's improved in the clutch. Because, like I said, he didn't have that clutch gene in the fourth quarter. Georgia absolutely shuts down Ole Miss on defense. Trinidad Chambliss can't complete a pass. He doesn't look like he knows what he's doing on the field. And that Georgia defense just answered the bell. They stepped up to the plate, and they just shut him down. So I'm interested to see that if this game gets into a fourth quarter, knockdown, drag out, whatever, you got to put the team on the quarterback's back in order to win it. I'm interested to see if Trinidad Chambliss has that clutch gene. If he does, this game can go either way because we've seen Gunner's clutch gene. So this quarterback matchup is so fascinating to me, and I think it's one of the most fascinating quarterback matchups we've seen all season long. You've got Trinidad Chambliss, who's probably more athletically gifted than I guess you could say Gunner Stockton is. He's probably got more NFL ceiling, all that good stuff. He's an electrifying player. He's got just an arm on him. Like, he can throw it a mile, he can run, but Gunner's just been Mr. Consistent. And it's a product of the players he has around him. It's a product of Mike Bobo's system. It's a product of who his head coach is. And Gunner and Kirby, I think, are very similar in the sense that off the field, they're very calm, cool, collected, but Gunner puts on the helmet and Kirby puts on the visor, and those dudes go to war. And you see a totally different personality and characteristics from those two guys. And I've said it, I think, every single podcast episode we've done. I think the best teams in college football, and it's personified by this Georgia team, are the teams that take on their coach's personality. And we've seen that just game in and game out. Every single Saturday, if we're down in the fourth quarter, we take on Kirby's calm, cool, collected mentality of, we're going to get this done. We're going to win this thing in the fourth quarter. Then on the flip side, when we're absolutely boat racing Texas in the fourth quarter and Kirby's still grabbing people's face masks and chewing them out.
And kicking onside kicks.
Yeah, exactly. Those players take on that personality of they're just fired up and they're willing to put the foot on the neck and just get the foot on the throttle, whatever you want to say, and get it done. So I'm getting all sorts of all over the place, but back to the Ole Miss thing, I'm just interested to see if they've improved in the clutch, mainly Trinidad Chambliss.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. He hasn't really had to do much in the clutch all year. That Ole Miss Oklahoma game, I believe it was the week after they played us, and that was a close-ish game.
Yeah,
and he played well. But outside of that, in our game, they really haven't had a close game. So he's been battle tested. He's played us. He's played a good Oklahoma defense, but that's 2 games out of 13 that they've played. And it's been a minute. So how does he respond? I don't know. I think if you can get pressure on the quarterback, that's always something you want to do. But especially for him, I think that pass rush really ramped up in the fourth quarter on the last game, and your defensive backs. I think that was a lot of the season really kind of clicked there, and then the Mississippi State game. Yeah. Fourth quarter against Ole Miss, I think you figured out a lot of your identity as a defense, because since that game, you haven't allowed more than 21. And as long as you're allowing under 20 as a defense, I think that's a great number. If your offense can't put up 3 touchdowns, you don't really deserve to win games a lot of times, I would argue. Yeah, I agree. Golly, they started out so well against Alabama. No points allowed through like that first quarter and a half, up 17-0. And then I post one of my favorite pictures I've ever made, which is where it says frauds, and then it has the Alabama A for the A in the word fraud.
Yeah.
And then Alabama started to come back, so I screenshotted my own post and reposted it and tagged Freezing Cold Takes. So I guess I'll take a bit of the blame for the way Alabama came back in that one.
Yeah. That's all on you.
I don't. This is 100% on me. I take the blame. Oklahoma fans should hate me. They should be mass reporting Saturday in Athens on Instagram right now as we speak, and I would not blame them at all. I probably had some Georgia fans report that post, and I totally accept that. I think I probably should report it myself. The completely off script, off topic question. But Cam Coleman entered the transfer portal earlier today. Before we had this episode planned for a couple of days now, but that just came up a couple of hours ago. Do you think Georgia's a team to watch for this one? Have you heard anything regarding Georgia so far?
I think it's always I don't know if it was always the Dogs, whatever, but like when the rumors started swirling and that Hugh Freeze was going to get fired and this transfer portal talk, and then we play Auburn, and that picture, I was just trying to look for it, I couldn't find it, but there's that picture of Kirby dapping up Cam Coleman after the game, and he's like, it was like always recruiting. And so like since then I've kind of been like locked in on the fact that we're in this race for Cam Coleman. Do I know? I have no idea. I mean, it's all hearsay, whatever, rumors. So I don't necessarily know, but gosh, it would be beautiful to see. I mean, how good would it be? He is a freak of nature, and we've seen it all season. He's been really the only highlight of Auburn's
Probably the reason they have a couple wins, if we're being honest at this point.
Entirely true. Like Jackson Arnold could, if he just threw it up to Cam Coleman every single game, his QBR would be like through the roof. Like it
would go up from whatever it is at this
10
moment.
times better quarterback. So I think he's a freak of nature, and I think it would be an awesome addition, especially with the fact that Zachariah Branch. We don't know what his decision is going to be, and I don't want to start rumors or anything. I'm focused on Ole Miss and the Sugar Bowl right now, but he's played so well this season. I would not be shocked if he declares for the NFL draft, and I would not be shocked if he's an immediate impact player in the NFL draft, so you can't really blame him. Colby Young's probably going to try to appeal and get an extra year of eligibility. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, it's so complicated, and I don't understand really how.
It's very inconsistent, too. It's like you never know who's going to get granted the year or not.
Exactly. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but man, if you lose just one of those guys, and God forbid we lose both of those guys, getting in a guy like Cam Coleman is a blessing from the Lord above. I think he is an absolute stud. I think he's an alien. I mean, the things he does, the way he contorts his body, his route running, his hands, his just frame. I mean, he's got the longest arms. I think if he walks around just standing straight up, his fingertips touch his kneecaps. So it would be awesome to have Cam Coleman sporting the red and black. And more so, this is my big thing with the transfer portal and getting guys from an Auburn or like Trevor Etienne from Florida last year.
Yeah.
It's awesome to have those dudes on your team, but it's even better that your rival doesn't have them. Like I think I get more satisfaction in the fact that Auburn doesn't have a freak of nature than I do. Like I get more excited for him just being on the Georgia football roster. So that's just my take on the whole transfer portal thing.
It is pretty crazy who Georgia does lose at receiver next year. We talk about how many players are going to return next year and how we're going to be so great. And I do still believe that. But when you kind of see that news of Cam Coleman, you start to look at all the players that Georgia has at wide receiver. Dylan Bell's gone next year. Noah Thomas is gone next year, unless he somehow gets another year. I don't know how he would do that. Zach Branch, I would say he's a 50-50 right now, based off what I've heard, because I think he's played definitely well enough down the stretch. Especially, I think he could just go to the combine and ball out, and he would raise his stock a lot. Like pro day, combine, whatever, he'll shoot up from that. And then if Colby doesn't come back, then he's technically eligible for that medical year. If he wants to apply for it, he could get it. Like we said, though, I don't really know how that's going to work out. So, but there's a possible scenario where you lose 4 wide receivers, and I mean, you'd return a couple, but and good talent, but a lot of guys you really don't want to lose. Bring in Cam Coleman. Realistically speaking, he would he would be the number 1 on that team if you do lose the 4 that we've just mentioned. So I think it's at least worth bringing up. For the longest time, my brother and I have just watched this dude be insane and ball out and be like, let's let Georgia go get him in the portal. And it's finally coming to fruition. And I call him earlier. I'm like, guess who just entered the portal? Like,
yeah.
We're getting close. And like you said, it's kind of one of those things. Kirby does not burn bridges with a recruit or a player or a coach unless he just truly does not want them.
Right.
What's the name of the receiver from Michigan who just tore up his NIL or his letter of intent? Brady, I don't know. Say his last name.
I can't remember his name, but I know exactly.
Starts with an M. But he was committed to Georgia for a long time, and then was a signing day flip to Michigan. Then everything happens with Sharon Moore in Michigan. What a crazy scenario that is. but all that happens, and he again tears up his letter of intent, and the rumor kind of started swirling: is he going to come try and play for Georgia? And everyone's kind of like, no, don't want him to. And I think sometimes in cases like that, maybe that's a bridge that's worth burning. But you see him after these games, these players he's recruited for years, and didn't get like. It's no hard feelings. It's no bad blood there. He always goes up, like you said, dap up Cam Coleman. Nobody went after him for sure. And you do that because, especially now, it's more important now than it's ever been, but especially now because you have the portal and you're going to go in and be like, hey, I have a good relationship with you. I've treated you well over the years, even when you haven't been my player. You know what we're about. Come play for the University of Georgia. Players like that, I think it'd be crazy if players didn't love other coaches and that just treat them like that, and never like I said, burn bridges is really the term that's typically used there.
Yeah.
But man, if Georgia could get him next year, that would just be a monstrous addition. And I want your thoughts on this too. Obviously we got both the Branch brothers last year in the portal, not for a cheap price either. And I had a friend reach out to me earlier saying, I don't know if Kirby would be willing to pay Cam Coleman what he might be asking. And I feel like over the years, Kirby's willing to pay for a position he may need out of the portal. And it's not going to be like a lot. I mean, it will be a lot, but it won't be like in terms of college football a lot. And I think he's willing to do that out of the portal. I just don't think he's willing to pay a high school player more than he's paying somebody on his team, or to just throw millions of dollars at a high school player. Typically speaking, I would think that's a pretty fair assumption to make, that.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Transfer's a little different.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, transfers, we've now seen it with what Lane did at Ole Miss, and he's the transfer portal king, and now Texas Tech this year, and everybody questioned, those two teams, and it's like, there's no culture. Those guys are a bunch of first-year players in Oxford, Mississippi, or in Lubbock, Texas. But at the end of the day, a transfer is a proven commodity on a college football field, and
Absolutely.
you gotta take the high school player, as much talent as they may have, with a grain of salt. Whereas a kid that's either played in the SEC, the Big 12, wherever he was, he's a proven commodity, and he's proven himself against high level quality talent. So, I think that's where the willingness to pay more for Kirby Smart is. But like we've probably said on this before, I know I've talked to many people about it. If you're just coming here for the money, then you're not even going to get a look from us. I mean, you got to come in here and you got to be willing to work. And what we've seen from Cam Coleman is, I think he's willing to work. I think he's willing to be that dude and take that next step forward on a national championship contending team in the Georgia Bulldogs. Because at Auburn, when they sucked, he was still playing his ass off. Every single day every single game, he looked like he had been in the gym. He was getting stronger. He was getting faster. He was getting better at route running, blocking, whatever. And he is a selfless player from what I've seen on the Auburn tape in the run game when he's when he's run blocking, like all of that thing. I think Cam Coleman has a good head on his shoulders, and he's willing to go to work, and he's not just here to get a check.
I agree 100%. And like you said, those are the players you want. We're willing to spend some money if we can get you to come to our team. But if that's all you want, if that's what you're about and you're not about getting better, then you're not coming to Georgia.
Right.
Realistically. Or if you do, then you're wasting your time. But I felt that was worth noting because obviously very good player. And Georgia could definitely use him given what we are losing in the offseason, or potentially losing in the offseason. And I think one point you brought up about Lane in the portal, it's a big reason why he left for LSU. I know this has been mentioned a good bit, but I don't think it gets enough attention even still, for the fact that he 33, and they even came out with these numbers recently about the number of players that were transfers and the number of players that were signed out of high school to each playoff team. I think Ole Miss, I believe they had the lowest percent that they actually recruited out of high school at 33%. And then something like 67, I know that's going to be a 6-7 joke later, when someone's watching this episode, about 67% of their team is a transfer player. So yeah. I don't blame him for going to LSU where he can go. Players don't want to play for Ole Miss. Like, realistically, nobody gets excited about Ole Miss football. That's not a shot at anybody. That's not a personal insult. That's just where we are in 2025, almost 2026. No one wants to go play for Ole Miss just for the sake of being a rebel.
Yeah.
They go because Lane Kiffin's the coach or they have money. That's just what it is at this point. Now, go to LSU. No matter who the coach is, there's some kids growing up in LSU in Louisiana that have dreamed their entire lives of going to play for LSU. Not saying that doesn't happen anywhere in Mississippi. It's just not the same deal. It's not the same icon that LSU is. So
Right.
I understand the decision to want to go from a place like Ole Miss where he spends so much time recruiting and offering money in the portal to where he can go get players out of high school and develop them. And I think that's true. While it can also be true what you said, where you don't blame coaches for going into the portal to go get players that have been proven on a college field.
Yeah.
Like, why would you not? So in a way, it's smart. But in another way, it's like it's more taxing, and you can hold on to these players at LSU a lot better than you could, or not even hold on to them better, but you can just get them at the start of their career and not have to go re-recruit your team each year, which is what happens a lot when you have to depend on the portal. Shifting gears a little bit there from Lane and the portal and Cam Coleman and all that. Pretty straight up question here. Who do you think holds the advantage in this game? I know we've spoken about how Ole Miss definitely is still a good team and has played well throughout the course of the year, but at the same time, Georgia's gotten a lot better. And I assume you'll say Georgia for this answer, but just kind of analyze this maybe a little bit, like who holds the overall advantage? What are some advantages they may have over us, and vice versa? What do you see here?
I mean, it is Georgia, and I think everybody in the world would say that right now. I think the roster talent advantage Georgia. I think really quarterback play advantage Georgia, defense advantage Georgia, coaching staff advantage Georgia. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. That Georgia has the advantage in this game, but you got to look in between the lines, in the margins, whatever you want to call it, outside the box. And I think the revenge factor is a big thing. And everybody's talking about Ole Miss. You lose to Georgia, that's number one revenge factor. And then you've got something to prove that you can win without Lane Kiffin. I think Pete Golding's got something to prove. I think that coaching staff has something to prove. Those players have something to prove. So that's somewhat of like a revenge factor, an outside factor that they're playing for. But like I said earlier in this show, Georgia's got a little bit of a revenge factor as well. And I think that it's not near as strong of a factor as, say, Ole Miss's, but what happened last year in the Sugar Bowl, in that exact same building, in that exact same bowl game, in the exact same round of the college football playoff, it was humiliating as a Georgia fan and especially as a Georgia player. Georgia comes off of an SEC championship win, an overtime victory against Texas last year. They've got the momentum. They're the number 2 team in the country. And Notre Dame just out-physicaled Georgia. And I think historically, you look back on recent history, you look back on these Kirby Smart coach Georgia teams and the Notre Dame teams, whether it's under Brian Kelly or even under Marcus Freeman, Georgia was always the clear advantage, clear roster talent advantage, clear just physical advantage. I think the roster talent fed into the physical, but like you knew Georgia as this team that was going to shut you down on defense and just kill you in the run game on offense until they broke out a big one or busted one over the top on a long pass play. And I think it was absolutely humiliating for that coaching staff. But I really think who is the X factor in this, and it's an obvious answer, and I'm kind of chalking it up here, but it's Gunner. Gunner came into this playoff as the only quarterback of the 12 teams that had a playoff start, and he had one, and it was that Notre Dame game. Carson Beck didn't have one because he sat behind Stetson. He never made it in 2023, and he was hurt in 2024, sat behind Gunner. Carson Beck never had it. Ty Simpson never had it. Fernando Mendoza, Julian Sayin, Dante Moore go down the list. Nobody had it except Gunner Stockton. And what happened to him? Well, he gets in there and gets shut down. I didn't think he personally had that bad of a game, but Notre Dame relatively shut down that Georgia offense. We only scored 1 touchdown and a field goal, and it was kind of a blowout win and a low-scoring blowout, if you want to call it that. I think Gunner was embarrassed. And then you go into the offseason and Paul Feinbaum and every national media, broadcaster, reporter, whatever is talking about how Georgia is not fine because Gunner Stockton is their quarterback and nobody saw that promise from him in the Sugar Bowl. So I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I know Ole Miss has the revenge factor after they want to revenge the loss that happened right behind me in Sanford Stadium. They want to revenge the Lane Kiffin thing, but I think Georgia and Gunner Stockton have that revenge factor as well.
Absolutely, I think that's a great point, and especially for Gunner. You had several players, and like you said, it's not even that Notre Dame had a better team. As you said, every time they've done this matchup between Georgia and Notre Dame in recent history, Georgia's been clearly the better team. That's part of what makes me so mad looking back at that game. I know Georgia had the advantage in most places. I think it came down to Notre Dame was a well-coached, connected team. Notre Dame was, and Georgia was a well-coached but not really connected team. Like it was a bunch of me, what I want, not really team-oriented thinking on that football team. And I think a lot of it, even though Gunner did come in at the end of the year, I think a lot of that stems from having Carson Beck as your quarterback for the entire season. I think that's just the sort of attitude that got instilled in that team from an early place. And this year it's been so much different. It's been so much different. You had a lot better leadership across the board, I'd argue. I think it always starts at the quarterback position or the really head coach. But from a player standpoint, definitely starts at the quarterback position. So I think it's definitely Georgia's advantage in this game, given all the trends, what's happened since the last matchup. And that's, again, not to discredit Ole Miss. It's just to really give Georgia credit for the way they've turned around the year in a lot of ways. But also, like you said, there is definitely a revenge factor. And I do always think that rematches will bode the defenses on both sides better than the offense, I guess. You go. I've repeated this talking point a couple times now, so whoever's watching these episodes is getting tired of hearing this. But I keep going back to the idea that from a first matchup to a second matchup, defenses can make a lot of changes to offset what they struggled with in the first game, whereas for the most part, offenses can't. The changes that the defense is going to make, the offense would have to do a lot to really offset that, and would have to change their identity as a team in a lot of ways. You can change your identity or change what your focus is as a defense, I feel like, a lot easier than you can on offense. You got to stick to what you're really good at and where you can execute on an offense, whereas defensively, you're adjusting, you're attacking the ball, you're attacking the other team in whatever spot. So I think this really, I may not have explained that the best way, but I really think overall this is a game that always the rematches, at least in college football, will really, 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 really help defenses a lot more than they will offenses. Which prompts the next question I have for you. Do you think this will be a high-scoring or low-scoring game, or do you think it will really kind of be a balanced game? What do you see happening in that regard?
Like the first game between these two teams in Athens was a shootout. I mean, Ole Miss scores on their first 5 possessions. Georgia scores on all of theirs. No punts in that game for Georgia. It was an offensive showcase and masterclass by both offensive staffs. And until the fourth quarter, there was little to no defense between the two teams. So I think, it's probably, like you said, a rematch benefits the defenses more than it does the offenses. I think this will be not as high scoring as the previous matchup here in Athens. I think, I think both of these offenses are capable, but I think Georgia's defense has taken a serious step forward, and I think Ole Miss has the tape on them now, so they know somewhat what is coming from this Georgia team, but it's a bowl game. Something crazy always happens. There's something crazy up both of these teams' sleeves. You see it in these types of games when it's all or nothing, and you win or go home, and you see some double pass, some busted play, some punt block, some fake punt, something like that. that is could potentially bust this game wide open. And that might sound crazy because we've seen a 10-3 game in the Miami Texas A&M one. We've seen some crazy special teams performances all throughout the playoffs thus far. So it's been a relatively defensive led, low scoring playoff of outside of the Oregon JMU game in the first round. But I just think that the defenses will take a step forward, but these two offenses, it will be somewhat similar, and there will be some fireworks from these two offenses come New Year's Day.
I agree. I think that's pretty much perfectly where I'm at right now. I'm kind of in like a not exactly like 30 to 32-20, but like 30s and 20s, that sort of range for this game. Again, I think it's pretty clear that I'm picking Georgia, but I'll give a more strict, better thought out answer to that question a little later in my recording. And then I'll press you before I answer that question to give your own score prediction in just a couple minutes. But obviously, one of the elephants in the room here is that Georgia has not played football for when they'll play this game. It'll be the first game they've played in like 25 days. If I'm doing that math correctly, it might be more than that, might be more like 26. But it's been a long time off for Georgia, and we've obviously seen last year it was a very unique scenario as far as the seeding. I think we've even spoken about this a little bit, where getting a bye week last year, people would claim that it hurt the teams that got the bye. You and I kind of see the point that the teams that were actually ranked higher weren't really the better team, given Boise and Penn State, Arizona State and Texas, and then Ohio State and Oregon. Like, our game was the only game where I feel like we actually were the better team, and we're the higher ranked seed and just didn't play a good game. But so far in the history of the playoffs, the team that is coming off of a bye is 0-4. And it's like you said several times, rust versus rest. Like, what's going to happen here as far as, does this rest and getting these players back help Georgia, or do they get out of rhythm? I know, like you mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of these videos of that Georgia practice being insane from a physicality standpoint, energy standpoint. Kirby's got the guys ready. There was a piece, I've actually already reposted this and spoken on this one time. Dog Sports Memes posted a screenshot of the 2024 SEC Championship and said, "Our guys get to take a rest." That's what Kirby said at the trophy presentation. Our guys get to take a rest, get to take a break, whatever it was. 2025, it's him up there saying, "They just told me they want to practice again." Like, it's such a different mentality and such a different way I think the coaching staff even is handling it. And honestly, I can't really blame them. It's such a new format. Like, you've got to get used to how you're handling this. Now, at the same time, Kirby and a lot of guys on that staff were there when they had the long breaks between the SEC Championship and then the playoff game for the 4-game playoff. But now you've got to factor in, hey, these other guys have been playing a football game. So they're more, I guess, I don't want to say in shape, but more prepared, more in rhythm, I guess. But it's been a long break. No one can deny that. How does Georgia regain the momentum they really had heading into this break, especially from a defensive standpoint, but also considering, how do we find that offensive success we had where we were starting games quick, and we were putting up a lot of points and just running the football so effectively, and really were efficient and pretty smooth in the pass game there for a while. How do we just overall regain the momentum that we had those couple weeks leading into Christmas break, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to talk about it in a general scope first, in the sense of the entire playoff, all the teams in it. And I think what we saw in round one, we last year in 2024-25 season, we saw the first round go 4-0 for the home teams. So 6, 7, 8, 9, or sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those teams went 4-0 undefeated when hosting the playoff game. This year, they went 2-2. Obviously, Miami upsets at Texas A&M, and Bama upsets at Oklahoma. I'm calling my shot here, and I don't know which teams are going to win. I'm not predicting that yet, but I'm going 2-2 this year. I think 2 teams that played in round one will win, and 2 teams that got a bye will win. So we're going to see that kind of trend continue. But I think the biggest thing for Georgia is we've been here before. If you look at the entire playoff landscape this season, nobody has repeated exactly what they did last year. What I mean by that is Ohio State played a first round game and then carried that momentum into it. They didn't rust. They didn't get rest, but they didn't rust either. They kept that momentum. They used that revenge factor from the Michigan game, and they went on to win the national title. Notre Dame played round one and won in round two, beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Those teams aren't in those exact situations. Ohio State, with them playing last year, they're getting a bye this year. They don't know how to handle what that rest is. Like you said, you brought up a great point with the quotes after the 2024 versus 2025 SEC championships, what Kirby said. We get to rest in 2024 this year. They want to go practice again. We've been here before. We know what it takes to properly handle a rest period, a bye week, whatever you want to call it, and you rest effectively, but you continue to practice just as hard as you were. And I think it goes back to a quote earlier in the season before the SEC championship when Kirby was like, if you play scared of getting injured, then why even play? Whatever the quote was, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was kind of, I think, our mentality going into the Sugar Bowl last year. Like, oh, we don't need to practice as hard for the full 28 days or whatever we had off. We can just practice, for the last final 5, 6, 7 days of the practice period in the rest that we had going into the second round. I think now he's like, nah, we're keeping the pedal to the metal. If a guy gets hurt, man, it sucks, but he gets hurt. That's just football. And so I think we know how to handle it. I think we know our place. I think we know what we're doing with this extended amount of time off. And we get back to just the fundamentals. Like you can go back and retroactively get back to tackling drills and route running and all that stuff. And I think Kirby did that. I think he is focused on sound football right now. And it is hard ass practices. It is bloody Tuesdays every freaking day. Any day that ends in Y is bloody for this Georgia team right now. So I think we're taking that and we're going into this second round with a bye week under our belts, with a different type of fire, passion, and energy than we saw last year.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's so clear. Just that whole attitude change in that in Athens really has just really stood out to me. And I think we look at these matchups, and I think 2-2 is a good prediction. I'll announce this before long, so I'll just go ahead and say it. I think Ohio State wins, though I think Miami is a better challenge than a lot of people want to say. I'm shocked that more people aren't picking Miami, but I'm also not because everyone loves Ohio State for whatever reason. But I think Ohio State will win that game. I don't think it'll be a blowout. Indiana and Alabama could go either way. It really could, because I could see this being like, okay, Bama just had a big comeback. It really was a gigantic comeback, and they did it quick. I think they kind of found their identity they had earlier in the year in some ways with that win. Do they carry it for 4 games against really good opponents? I don't know, but they have done that before this year. Maybe not playoff caliber teams, but they've went on some good stretches. So I think Indiana wins. I think Alabama puts up a good fight for sure. I wouldn't be shocked either way. I think we win our game like we said, by not exactly a blowout, but not really like a nail biter. And then I do think Oregon upsets Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech, they have a good defense. They've been pretty good, pretty sound on that side of the ball. They've had a good year. I do think Oregon's a little more battle tested. Some people could question that because it's not like Oregon's played exactly great teams, but they've played some. Comparing it to Texas Tech, they've played some good teams. Yeah. So I think 2-2, 3-1 sort of record for the bye week teams is good, and that's what it needs to be. It doesn't need to be, and it's not like you can control these games, but I feel like that's good for college football when you have some of the teams on bye win, some of the teams on bye get upset. I think that's a good thing. Whereas if all the teams on bye are winning every single time, it's kind of like, okay, why do we even pick these games? And then vice versa if byes really hurt you that bad. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting, and we're only in year 2 of this 12-team format in the byes and how they work. So, I think you said this before, just how it was such a small sample size you have to pull from last year. So you'll see this year whatever happens, and really be able to adjust how we predict this and then just view it in general moving forward. Final question of the day. It's been a minute since we've gotten to do one of these and hear just a wacky score prediction from Hammy. It's been working, no complaints there. What you got? I'd just go and say it. I want to hear it.
Yeah, we're sticking to the trend. We're not picking a winner. I'm copping out of that. But yeah, it's gonna be a wacky score. I'm going 33-19. Not saying a winner. I'm not saying a winner, but 33-19 is my score. If you go back to right here, I've got it right behind me.
Yeah, I was about to say it.
Yeah, that was 33-18. So we're going 1 point off, but it was that was a great day in Indianapolis, and I'm hoping for a great day in New Orleans. So yeah, there's my score prediction: 33-19. Weird, wacky, something crazy is going to happen.
I love it though.
And one of these days, I'm going to be right. And it's
I hope you are. I hope you are. I think we need good energy heading into New Orleans this time, and I think that's a great way to get it going. Bring me a pretty similar prediction to the greatest game in Georgia football history, which would be the 2021-2022 national championship.
Yes, sir.
But then I do love that sort of range, like 20-ish, 30-ish. I think that's probably where this game will be. Not again, like we've said, those offenses are going to score some points, but the defenses bode really well. I've got Georgia. I'll be recording a little bit more to add on to my podcast episode here in a little bit, so I'll go a little more in depth onto that. I've got a lot of stuff I want to say with respect to that. But Hammy, thank you as always for joining these episodes. If this is the last one we do all year in the regular season, it's been a great year breaking it down. But hey, that's not going to happen. Georgia's going to go win this football game. So, but in the event that we don't, we know it's possible and what's not. So it's been a great year breaking it down, but let's keep it going. Let's win 3 games and go get a beautiful CFP national championship trophy.
Let's do it, baby. Let's not make this the last. We're gonna
absolutely
do it.
Not. Absolutely, we got this. We're gonna get it done.
Yes, sir. You the man.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
As always, thank you to Hammy for joining for these interviews. Always makes some great content, and glad that y'all guys continue to support these videos, these clips, and just enjoy listening to some Georgia football content. I'm going to go ahead and give you my score prediction on this game. I've sat on this for probably a week now. I've done deeper Ole Miss analysis each day and deeper analysis just on this game in general each day, I feel like. And the number that sticks out to me, 35-24. Georgia on top. And I say this for several reasons. I do think this will be a much better game for defenses than the first time for both of them. Defenses always, and I just mentioned this in my interview with Hammy, defenses always seem to fare better from rematches than offenses do. And the part of the reason I feel that is a defense can make minor adjustments like slanting a different way, containing a different way, maybe, I don't know, spacing a little bit differently. And these are small things that offenses can change too, but defenses can do these things. Maybe bring an extra guy into the box on certain personnel, certain formations they might see, and they can really completely affect what the offense is doing with these several changes. There's also a little bit more anticipation factor for these defenses because they know what they're going to go up against from the first time. So they can really change not change a lot, but change a lot, if that makes sense. What they're changing defensively is not like reinventing the wheel or groundbreaking or fully changing their identity. They're just making minor changes, which can definitely impact the opposing offenses that they're playing. And but even back to that point of changing their identity, they can do that more so than offenses, because as an offense, whatever worked the first time or whatever you're really good at as a team, you can't just abandon that fully. Like, that just doesn't work for offenses. If Georgia's great with running the ball all year and Ole Miss finds a way to stop it, you can't just fully abandon the run and throw the ball every play. It doesn't work like that. So for logic consistent with that, that's why I think the defenses will fare very well always, or not always, but typically from rematches, and I think that logic is going to hold true here. Ole Miss has the same team that they had last time, and outside of Lane Kiffin, they have the same staff that they had last time. They're still a really good team, but I do have to admit here and concede that Lane Kiffin is still a major loss. He's an offensive mastermind, and I can't remember who brought up this point the other day. I watched a lot of Georgia football commentary on Instagram, and somebody was saying that nobody was calling this Charlie Weiss's offense a couple weeks ago. Everyone was calling this Lane Kiffin's offense, and whether Charlie Weiss was calling the offense or not, or Charlie Weiss was technically the offensive coordinator back then, that's a fair point. Like, nobody was calling that his offense; it was Lane's offense. So losing one of the best offensive minds in the country right before your playoff run, and he's the one who, in large part, got you there. You can't just ignore that. That's a big deal. Even still, I think Ole Miss is a great team with a great coaching staff right now. Definitely takes a hit from losing Lane, but it matters. It means something to mention that. Georgia's defense has improved a lot since that first game. And it's not just like, oh, statistically we're looking a little better. Like, no, that's true. But watch this Georgia team, and it looks so much different. Your defensive backs are playing in phase. Seems like there's a lot more effort and a lot more creativity in the pass rush, I would say. And effort's probably not the right word. They're more of like I don't know, just a new fire's been lit in them, because I think when their defensive backs start to play better, they have more of a permission to get after the quarterback a little bit. When the linebackers as a core start playing a little better, they have a bit more of a permission to get after the quarterback. So efforts are poor choice of words there. I apologize for that. But more so just like I said, a new momentum, a new fire has been lit under them. That defense has played a lot better. That pass rush has been a lot better. Georgia's offense has been pretty consistent since that game. They've played about how you'd expect each game following that. I don't really have concerns about the Georgia offense. The concern I have is that being off for this long, how does that offense look? How does that offense regain the momentum that it did have throughout the year? I think it's easier to reestablish defensive momentum after a long break, and I think we saw that between Georgia and Notre Dame last year, because Georgia's defense played well in that game. There were just a couple pivotal things, such as the kick return for a touchdown, the turnover right before half that led to a touchdown. Really, Georgia's defense only allowed 3 field goals in that game. I don't think that gets mentioned enough, because 23 doesn't look horrible, but it doesn't look good either, obviously. But it's really the Georgia defense only allowed 9 points that game. So I would say if you catch momentum before you have a long bye week defensively, that's easier to regain than it is offensive, if that makes sense. But again, Georgia's offense is efficient. It does what it's supposed to do, and it's a good offense. It's not. I wouldn't consider it an elite offense. I think calling it a great offense would be a good place to go, especially with how balanced it is with the weapons you've got. You've had several games over 200 yards rushing, at least 2 now, probably more than that. And you're not a perfect offense, but I think you're a good to great range, and I think that's all you really need to win this game. Because I believe it was Nate. Nate Frazier came out and spoke on how good that Ole Miss defense was the first time. While he says that and he's playing on the field, statistically they don't look that great. And Georgia still scored on every drive. So they do have some guys out there that are good defensive. They have good players all over the field. Give Lane credit for going out into the transfer portal and doing what he did. A high percentage, like 2/3 of their team, was transfer portal. And that comes down to Lane can scout, go find that talent. I guess they're still already proven if they played college football already, but he knows how to go get talent out of the portal. And that's an impressive skill. That's kind of what you have to do at Ole Miss in a lot of ways, because as I mentioned with Hammy, that you don't have a lot of players that really want to go play for Ole Miss. They want to go play for Lane, or they want to go play for money. So getting those players out of the portal is needed, and he does a great job of it. But anyway, they've got athletes out there. Georgia's culture is in a lot of ways what sets them apart in this game. Kirby tells his guys right now how hyped up Ole Miss is to be playing this football game. Ole Miss feels that, I'm not going to say they felt like they got robbed, but they were winning that game by a good bit from it. They were up 35-26 late in the third in Athens, and Georgia really turned it around in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss probably deserved a win up until that fourth quarter when they hurt themselves on offense. But anyway, Ole Miss is really fired up for this game, and Kirby's telling his guys, like, that's what's going on. Like, they think they can get you. They feel like they got not robbed the first time, but they feel like that Georgia got away the first time, and they're trying to come after you. You should feel privileged to be, or you should be very proud of the fact that you have such a target on your back and play with a chip on your shoulder now, is what Kirby's going to tell those guys. So I believe that. And I think he's going to use that as sort of a bit of a momentum, and to quote Nick Saban, a bit of rat poison, a good rat poison for this Georgia team. It would be actually the other way around. It would be rat poison for Ole Miss is the way that would work. Anyway, Got Georgia 35-24. I think that's a pretty realistic score given all the stats that we've been looking over for this game. Going to go ahead and look at the other playoff games and give you my predictions there. We've got three. We've got Ohio State and Miami, Indiana and Alabama, Texas Tech and Oregon. I'm going to go in that order and break them down. Miami, number 2 Ohio State versus number 10 Miami. Miami has a much better team than people give them credit for at this point in the year, I believe. The 2 losses look pretty bad and they hurt, but Miami's still a really good football team. People tend to really quickly forget that Miami, most people for 5 weeks to start the year would have considered that their number 1 team if asked. And then they lost that game to Louisville. Carson Beck played a bad game, and here we are. But that front 4, that defensive line for Miami is crazy. Number 4 is crazy. And I don't think Ohio State's really played a pass rush quite like that, a defense quite like that. This being said, Ohio State has a lot more overall talent in my view. And despite the fact that they have an easy schedule, they still have a great team. They have a very talented team. They can hang with anyone in the country, and I really believe that. I also believe that Carson Beck is too inconsistent for just for Miami to be able to put together a good enough stretch of games to get to the national championship. I believe he's too inconsistent to have belief that he'll get it done against, again, a good Ohio State team, a good Ohio State defense in the Cotton Bowl. I just don't see it happening. If Carson Beck plays his A game, then Miami has a really good shot, but I just don't see that happening. I think he plays a B or C game, and Ohio State gets it done. Indiana and Alabama is an interesting one because, again, you've heard this before with myself speaking to Hammy, but Alabama played really well after they went down. They were down 17-0, came back on a 34-7 run to beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma. They became the first team to ever beat another team on the road in these playoffs, in the playoff 12-team system, or just the college football playoffs in general. I think Alabama has a lot more talent than Indiana, but this being said, Indiana doesn't care about that. Indiana still has talent. Indiana is very well coached as a team. So for that reason, I've got Indiana, and I do think it'll be by less than a touchdown. I think it'll be a very close game, very good game. Indiana, it right now kind of takes that attitude that Alabama had a couple years ago. Chris Ignetti's from that Bama tree. He's a Saban product. So I think Indiana has a lot of characteristics that Alabama used to. Regardless of the talent gap, Indiana's well coached. I think Indiana's winning this game. And then the one that is the only upset I have is number 5 Oregon over number 4 Texas Tech. And I think Texas Tech has a really good defense, but I think Oregon is a little more battle-tested than Texas Tech. I know BYU just beat Georgia Tech and they lost to Texas Tech twice, but BYU's not that great of a team. I don't believe that. No one's fooling me with that, quite honestly. Who did they play all year? Would be one of my main questions. Who are they to say that they have a great team when they haven't really played anybody? So I don't think that Texas Tech has really been battle tested, given that BYU's not that great in my opinion. And I think Oregon hasn't played that great of teams, but they did play a ranked USC. They did play a ranked Iowa. They lost to Indiana the first time by 10, but it was still a close game, and they were in it for quite a while. And Oregon, hanging with the number 1 team that has been clearly the number 1 team throughout the year, I think that still gives me belief that they'll win this game. And again, Texas Tech just hasn't really done much to impress me, although they're good statistically. Jacob Rodriguez is a great player, and he's had a historic year. Who's he done it against? And it's not a shot at Texas Tech and not a shot at Jacob Rodriguez or anybody. I just haven't seen enough to believe that you're going to beat a team that is a little more battle-tested than you, and honestly has, I'm not going to say more talent than you, because Texas Tech spent a lot of money in the transfer portal and in recruiting. But I will say that the culture and the identity of Dan Lanning wins Oregon this game. So I'll take Oregon here. Moving on a little bit to those injuries. I mentioned that Colby and Ethan Barber are back and practicing and that they're probable. I definitely expect Ethan Barber to play. Now that Colby's probable, I expect him to play. Wouldn't be shocked if that does change later in the week for Colby, though, because, I don't know. It's crazy for him to be back as soon as he is. Considering Ethan Barber's injury, it's crazy that he's back as soon as he is as well, but it's been much longer for him. It's been over a month longer for him that he's had to recover from that injury. Chancey Bowens, it's worth noting that he's back at 100% and he's running with the twos. great to have him back. Obviously, he's been a massive weapon for Georgia throughout the year. And then you've got 5 that are out. Jordan Hall's obvious. Kyron Hall is fairly obvious. But then Aguero's been ruled out. Obviously, it's looking more and more like Drew Bobo is going to be out for the year. He got surgery on his foot, is what we've heard, so he would be out for the year. And Gabe Harris has turf toe. At first, it wasn't believed to be that bad, but he's now been ruled out of this game, unfortunately. So five pretty key losses for Georgia. 3 that really, really, really matter. Five key losses there for Georgia. And you got some guys who are back, and some of them playing at 100%, some of them playing close. Incredible that you get Ethan Barber and Colby Young back in the same year. Don't know how the training staff at Georgia does it. Don't know how the strength and conditioning staff does this at Georgia. But Georgia has the best training staff in the country. And I think time and time again this has been proven. With George Pickens getting back on the field when he did a couple years ago, and now these two, I think it's pretty much solidified. Now I've got a Q&A. I got a couple questions from my Instagram story earlier today. Or earlier yesterday, I believe. I might be wrong on that. But just a couple of questions about this game. A lot of them were about Colby's status. I've gone over that a good bit in this video, so we'll leave that as it is. But we got a couple about specifically Ole Miss, and then one about Georgia. Ole Miss, how have they changed? They really haven't. They've lost Lane, obviously, but outside of that, they haven't really changed. I believe the question initially asked, like, yeah, we know Georgia's changed and how they've changed. How has Ole Miss changed? I think you're playing a very similar product. And as far as like challenge level, it will be pretty similar to what it was the first time. How will Ole Miss play without Lane Kiffin? Kind of piggybacks off of that question. I think they're a very similar team to what they were. Maybe they don't have the advantages in certain situations to attack certain areas of the field. In zone coverage and man coverage, know their matchups. They don't really have the matchups they would have liked the first time in man coverage because Ellis Robinson's playing that great. DeMello Jones is playing that great. But overall, to both those questions, I don't think it really changes. I don't think Ole Miss has changed since the first time much outside of Lane. And without Lane, I don't think it really changes their approach to this game or how big of a challenge they're going to be. And then finally, got a good question. How will Gunner do in his second college football playoff start? Obviously, Gunner's first start ever was in the Notre Dame game last year when Georgia lost 10-23. Gunner played what I thought was a good game overall. Great considering it was his first start ever. Had a beautiful pass to Arian Smith down the field. Had 2 other great passes. One to Dylan Bell, which got dropped. One to Cash Jones for a touchdown. Again, this game and everything surrounding it last year should give Georgia bad memories, and it does. It does for me for sure. But I think Gunner had a lot of promising moments last year, 200-something yards, threw a touchdown, completed over 60% of his passes, I believe. And this is a guy who, again, had never started a game before, came in the SEC championship a little under a month before that, and led Georgia to victory. So I think a lot of people saw at the time, like, hey, this guy's good. Maybe he's got some mechanics that need to be refined. Maybe he's not perfect, but he's good, and he'll do well for Georgia in the future. But in the second CFP start, I think there's definitely a couple differences from then to now. I think he's gotten quicker with his reads. I think he's better ball carrier vision, I would say. You watch some of his clips against Texas last year where he's running the ball, and I don't know, maybe he misses a lane or something or misses an opportunity to use a blocker. He's had some incredible plays. He looks faster on tape this year than he does last year running the ball, in my opinion. I think that's a big deal. Gets to his reads quicker. I think his throws have been quicker. His throwing motion in general is a lot quicker than it was at this point last year. Last year, it probably cost us a couple of plays and cost us the football right before half on the fumble, which they ultimately threw a touchdown on. So I would say he's changed in the fact that he reads the field better. He's developed a lot more physically. He's gotten faster. He's gotten stronger. Again, reads the field better and throws the ball just much better from a mechanics, from a physical standpoint. He's improved in pretty much every aspect that he could, and he was always a great leader to start with. So I think that's how it changes for him in his second CFP matchup. Second CFP start, rather. But anyway, I'm really excited to see what this game looks like. That's all the analysis I have, but I did want to wish you all, it's just been Christmas season. Wanted to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Hope you really enjoyed spending time with your family. I hope that you have enjoyed celebrating the birth of our Savior Jesus Christ. I hope that you guys all have a happy new year. Pray that you guys all have a happy new year. I did want to read you a verse that I put on the Merry Christmas post that I had on Christmas, obviously. It's Isaiah 9:6, which says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Now, if you've been watching this podcast series for a while now, I believe this is the 17th or 18th episode coming up. But I always like to do a moment where I hone in on a Bible verse or my faith as a Christian, or just something in that realm. And I thought this is a perfect time to say it. We have an everlasting gift of peace in Jesus, the Savior that's been born to us, as we remember him and celebrate him on this holiday season, in this Christmas season. Our world is screwed up. I think a perfect example to point to is last year, New Orleans, the horrific terrorist attack. I've already gone over that in this video. I know that's got to be on a lot of people's hearts and minds heading back to New Orleans this week, heading back into this game. But just know we have a gift that you can accept in Jesus Christ. And ultimately, if you pursue him and push towards him and try to build a relationship with him, and you do that, you'll be in paradise with him. And I just think that's so important for everyone to know that. It would be hateful for me to not share this stuff with you. And I know I get a lot of great responses, and I appreciate those of you who are followers of Christ. Your encouragement means a lot to me. But to the people who might be watching this or might watch on Instagram and don't follow Christ, just know I love you the same. And it doesn't change the way I view you or think about you. And me promoting this is not out of hatred for you or saying that whatever you think, I just think you're stupid. I'm not saying that at all. I did get a backlash on that Instagram post where I posted Merry Christmas. I had the verse. He said, it was someone who said, "Why is there religion on this account?" And I understand why people might not want to see that. But as someone who does have some sort of influence in the Georgia football realm, I believe I'm called to, lead people where I can and try to speak truth into people's lives where I can. So it's not a hateful thing. It's not saying if you don't think like me, screw you. Not saying that at all. But it's just what I'm called to do, and I feel like it's the right, loving thing to do. So I wanted to address that as well. But I think that's so important to hear. Isaiah 9:6 was the verse speaking on the birth of Jesus. And again, I just hope pray you've all had a very Merry Christmas season. I pray you all have a Happy New Year. And whatever ways you want to change in the new year, that you put your mind to it. Lean on God to complete those goals, those New Year's resolutions, whatever they may be, if you're taking part in that. But anyway, that brings us to the end of the episode. I thank you all for watching. Go Dogs, and I'm so glad that you've tuned into this episode. I'll have a breakdown of this game at some point as its own episode, as a podcast episode. I take that back. It might not be as its own episode. I know I'll have breakdown of this game in some way, shape, or form on the YouTube channel, and then hopefully some smaller clips on Instagram. But I thank you all for watching. God bless. Go Dogs. Have a great holiday season, and let's go beat Ole Miss yet again. Good to see you guys.